Several people were lying under the rubble on a rainy night. Among them, a woman runs with a briefcase in her hand. Men chase after her, shouting not to let her escape. But an old man shouts for them to stop. Jongrichu says that pursuing them would only cause unnecessary red juice to be spilled. He says that the priority at that moment was awareness. After that, they observed the bodies on the ground. Among them was Kim Se-yuk. The old man says that he was impressive for a man from a small country and asks how he dared to compete. Smiling and exuding a powerful aura, he says that he was the only one worthy of being a divine figure. With his arms open and looking upward, he says he has fulfilled the promise. Before him, a giant eye opens amidst the lightning striking in front of him. It affirms that the old man has fulfilled it. Jongrichu says it was his turn to fulfill his own and asks to ascend as a constellation of the earth, to let him ascend to what they call celestial. The eye agrees, and thus the process begins as the system starts analyzing the request. However, a message appears stating that he did not meet the requirements. Surprised, they discover that the young man who died was the only one who met the requirements. With that, the arena on Earth was closed and all protections were removed. The entity tells the man that he did not meet the requirements, and he asks how it dared to deceive him. He shouts that it was the entity itself that told him that if he killed Se-yuk, he could ascend to the celestial rank. It says that is why it made the request as soon as he asked. Throwing lightning down on Richu, it repeats that he did not meet the requirements, and the other men end up being struck as well. They are all injured, and the old man curses it. The entity says that it was a very pleasant moment and that it would devour his world. Under the destroyed city, the rain was still falling intensely. Knocking on a door, the woman appears shouting for Kim Se-yuk. When he does not respond, she calls him an idiot. On the floor, there were several vials and books scattered around. Sitting, he asks if she was there. She asks how he could be so calm with the world ending, and the young man replies that he could do nothing but alchemy. Half indignant, she throws a bag on the ground and tells him to take it. Seeing it, he is surprised. Picking up a vial with an elixir in his hand, he asks what had happened. She says that Zhang betrayed his brother. Simon asks if Se-yuk did not use the elixir. She says that he even knew how to use it, but after the guild members died, they threw it to her. Downcast, the young man says he understands. She says that with that, she paid off the debt she owed to Simon, and he asked about it. Smiling, she asks if he was still thinking about that. Scratching her head, the woman says that her revenge led to his brother's death. Kim says that was not true and that revenge was a separate matter, and people deserve to be punished. That his brother's death and revenge were different things, and the woman says he had potential. She turns and puts her hand on the doorknob. He asks if she was leaving right after coming all this way, and smiling, the girl says she was going into battle. She says that the old man summoned something incredible, and that the system removed the protection rights. Kim says he saw it and was shocked by it. Since he was the only one who saw his brother's status window, he knew that he would be the only one with the requirements for the Constellation. She says that things seemed pretty bad. The place they were in was not safe and says he would die this time, and he asks why she was not running away. Turning around, she says that running away was not her style and that she had no more reasons to live. Leaving, she tells him to drink the elixir because the sword saint gave up to give it to him. Apologizing, Kim says that it was originally his, but without giving it much importance, the girl says she was leaving. Slamming the door and stepping out into the rain, the woman thanks him for everything. Simon asks to see his status window and says that it was pathetic and that it was useless. He needed a form of energy for alchemy that was aligned. After awakening, it was the culmination of all his time, and he would never have dreamed of it if he had obtained the emerald bar. Opening the elixir, he wonders if only poison was left and thinks that his mind did not collapse. Throwing it into the circle he made, he thanks Se-yuk and Malsuk because he had reached his goals and could die. He was not sure if that would work in that environment. However, alchemy was based on equivalent exchange. When the magic starts working, several blue lightning bolts rise from the ground. An explosion of light occurs around him, with white lightning bursting forth. A while later, the stone on the ground breaks. The system says that he successfully transmitted a mythical product. He is happy because the system gives him 500 points and a title. Looking at the object that appeared from the stone, he feels pleased. It was the Philosopher's stone. Holding it in his hand, he says it was a ventilated item. He gets careless and ends up cutting his finger, and then the strawberry juice on the stone creates a bond between them. From his hand, the stone jumps to his chest, leaving him startled. His power was so intense that he began to feel severe pain. Suddenly, the window shatters with a loud crash. A head rolls in front of him, leaving him in shock. When he looks more closely, he realizes it was Malsuk. The entity is surprised to see the Philosopher's Stone and cannot believe it is seeing it in person. Feeling its aura, Kim realizes that its presence is overwhelming. The eye says that it had the potential to become a constellation and that it was an unexpected harvest. Simon thinks that everything was his brother's fault and laments his incapacity for mana. Suddenly, the system announces that synchronization is complete and that the unique status has been unlocked. At that moment, the stone begins to merge with his chest and speaks to him. It asks him to transmute anything he wants. He then says that the only thing he wants is to take revenge on the entity. He asks to live a life without mana incapacity. The system starts issuing warnings and an unbearable pain invades the young man. Based on the current state of the owner, the transmutation power of the Philosopher's Stone itself was being used. Independent transmutation was initiated and an indescribable power began to emanate from his body. Noticing this, the entity starts to become surprised. An artifact that had never been created before is born and Simon begins to draw its attention. It starts to be in disbelief that he had created his father's legacy for the first time. Kim attracted the attention of the Celestial, earned 100 achievement points, and a constellation in the galactic arena began to observe him. Amid all the system's warnings, the young man was unsure of what had happened. He knew that he had attacked the entity back. In the city, the sun shines through the window, catching the young man's attention. Looking around, he notices that he is in his studio apartment. He wonders if the blood-filled eyes staring at him were just some kind of mental trick. He felt as if death was approaching and that feeling was still present. He is pulled out of his thoughts by the ring of a cell phone. The nations that remained standing were the United States and China, but they were also filled with chaos, so he threw the phone away. When he looks more closely at it, he realizes that it is the year 2030. Kim discovers that he has returned 11 years to the past. He returned to when he was 28 years old. While he was fighting, the Philosopher's Stone took control of his body and created something unknown. Paying attention to himself, he notices that he was different from the past. Even though he had gone back in time, he still could not feel happiness because he still had mana incapacity due to the accident. He had to wear glasses because his vision was poor. His senses were failing. However, the suffocating sense of oppression due to the lack of magic had completely disappeared. Opening his status window, he realizes that instead of mana incapacity, the Philosopher's Stone was in its place. Placing his hand on his chest, he wonders if it had transformed into a trait because of the assignment, but in any case, his wish had been granted. Smiling, he says that the magic deficiency was like shackles and had bound him all his life, and now it had disappeared. He could not remain calm knowing that, so he decided to drink. Opening the fridge, he grabs a can and opens it. The headache caused by the deficiency also disappeared, and all his stats were restored to their original state. Excited, he says that now he could finally enjoy the true taste of beer. In all of his stats, he had 4, 5, and 10 points, something that only a super rookie had. But looking closely, he realizes that it was not magic but affinity. The system had stated that the magic stat had been converted into a unique status. This meant that he was at level 1 himself. There were only a small number of players who possessed a unique status in his past life. Most of them had risen to higher levels like Siyuk and Richu. Other than that, no one knew what had happened. He wonders what had occurred, and the system states that his achievement points were 1,012,500. He did not know where they came from, but he decided to open the store first to check the titles. The first was a title related to class and growth type, which was the Alchemy Pioneer growth type. Malsuk, who could be described as a latecomer among the high ranks, was able to fight due to a fraudulent title. He decides to look at the other reward and see what he received. The other one stated that he had gained the attention of the Beyond, leaving him confused, wondering when he had received something like that. Reading more carefully, he wonders what the Beyond was. If it was supposed to be something different. Lying down, he says that it was better than nothing. Smiling, he thinks that the most important thing was that his magic had been restored. He decides to test it, but first he needs to decompose the admission formula, change it into an appropriate magical form, and use affinity. Kim tries, but he does not have much success. He wonders if it was impossible to use magic with that power. He then decides to take a piece of chalk to draw a magic circle to see if anything changes. So much damage had been caused in the end that magic could not be used, but there could be great benefits to his affinity. As he wonders whether he should draw it, the stone begins to emit a strong glow, startling him. His body was rejecting it. The stone starts complaining incessantly, asking if it was an inefficient method. Simum is confused, wondering how the stone had transformed. He decides to take a deep breath and thinks that he would like to materialize it in the form of a spear. He wanted a spear similar to the one Richu used, and the stronger the special ability or addition, the better. Snapping his fingers, he thinks that the price to pay for that was the affinity he had. After that, he lets out a deafening scream, and the stone begins to shine more intensely. The system warns that he does not have enough affinity to achieve the desired results. The Philosopher's Stone was unstable and was searching for a different approach. Suddenly, a solution was found. With it being unstable, the recovery points required were 10,000, and the system asks if he would like to proceed, startling him. Kim begins to think that the stone had cured his magical deficiency and brought him back 11 years. Clicking yes, he shouts that he trusts it because it has already proven its worth. After the points are consumed, a blue energy begins to flow through his body, and the system announces that the stone has stabilized. Smiling, he thinks that alchemy would now become much easier. Then he decides to snap his fingers again. However, nothing happens. The system states once again that he does not have enough affinity, and Kim begins to get irritated. Running his hand through his hair, he says he is frustrated. Even when he had the deficiency, he was able to create a mythical weapon, and he asks if it does not believe that he could create a simple spear. The system requests another 500 achievement points, and since he needs it, he decides to accept. Simon snaps his fingers again, thinking that he should make the points worthwhile. Suddenly, a strong light begins to shine, illuminating the entire room. Outside the apartment, people on the streets start to notice something strange. Lightning begins to destroy the room around him. At the same time, the system issues a signal stating that a constellation is watching him. In the skies, the constellations Hermes and Athena take notice of the sudden appearance of lightning from Olympus. Kim, realizing this, wonders why the constellations suddenly became interested in him. The Olympus constellation was surprised by the traces left behind, which were mixing rapidly. Only 3 individuals remained calm. Among them, the ruler of Olympus, Zeus, shows great interest in the young man. Kim, still in the midst of the lightning, reads aloud that the constellations had retreated because of the traces. He wonders if all of this was because of the title he received, which was given to those who had the attention of the Beyond. The spear he longed for begins to appear, and he wonders what kind of chaos this was. Amidst the lightning, he decides to grab the spear. Looking closely, he discovers that it is Astrape, Zeus' spear, capable of controlling lightning. That was the main weapon used by Alexander, the Emperor of Lightning, who even after losing affliction, remained strong. On top of that, he wielded a spear whose power could compete with the magical lightning attribute of a great-ranking mage. He could not believe that he had managed to create a weapon of that caliber. Just by equipping it, everything around him was destroyed. It was an imitation of an item, according to its grade. Zeus was showing interest but had not made any offers or partnerships, and Kim thinks there was nothing strange about that. He recalls that the system never said the production was impossible, only that it needed the necessary requirements. He wonders if it would be possible to create the real Astrape. He gets excited about having his magic restored and having traveled 11 years back in time. With equivalent exchange, he could even use mythical weapons. Suddenly, the spear starts to disappear from his hands, and he wonders if it was an effect of transmutation or his points. He had given 500 achievement points and asks what the value of 500 points is for a mere level 1. Seeing the magic vanish, he comments that the power was insane. He felt angry for losing the 500 points when the system announced that the stone had reduced the exchange. They decided to return 50 points to him in proportion to its grade level. He quickly decided to open his status window. Before, there was nothing indicating level and grade, but now it was at level 1 with grade F. He wondered if it was due to the assignment and regression, so he decided to ask the stone 2 questions. He asked if the change happened because of the assignment, meaning his growth was influenced by it. The stone started speaking, and the young man asked what it meant. Mages cast spells. Even for alchemy, materials for transmutation and magic circles were essential. Kim tried sketching a magic circle, but it wasn't very efficient. All the things in the apartment started floating. It was different from affinity-based connection. This was an innovation for alchemy and the magical world. After managing to tidy up the room, he thanked the stone for practicing a new method. He thought that with this level of alchemy, the tutorial should be very easy. It would start at 5:00 p.m. January 17, 2030 at 5:00 p.m. The tutorial that could help him become recognized as a true player in the arena. Kim wondered why he had returned to the day of the summoning tutorial. Before that event was a conquest battle. He had been so weak that he couldn't even step into the occupation zone and got shot by an arrow. But now, thanks to alchemy, he was no longer afraid. Since he received messages, he decided to pick up his phone to check. There were over 100 missed messages from his siblings. He thought it was embarrassing to see that since he was Siok's older brother. One message told him how he had entered the academy and listed his achievements. Another asked if he had seen the sunrise because there was no more time left. Looking at the messages, he thought about how his brother was such a brilliant person. At the time, he didn't realize how much he was suffering. After the regression, he realized that the target of the galactic arena was his younger brother. He knew he could change that, but first he had to improve their relationship. Scratching his head, he wondered what messages he should send since he had nothing to say. It was annoying to worry so much about it, so he opened the chat and started typing. A few seconds later, he was shocked. Li Yuzhong was also alive. Worried, he sat on the bed and tried to calm himself because nothing had happened yet. Recalling images, he thought that he could change things. It was necessary to change. Seconds later, Kim accessed the arena tutorial and had 9 minutes until summoning. The miserable life of a man without magic and all the bad things that had happened would be changed by him. The tutorial opened, the game mode was domination, and the number of participants was 100. Someone was in the same jungle area as before, which gave him a sense of nostalgia. He could earn points by occupying zones or eliminating other players. It had been a long time since he participated in an arena, so he would remain cautious and aim for high ranks. A notification appeared stating that Zeus was watching him, leaving him confused. Right after, he read that Zeus had given him a mission. The mission window was activated and wondered why it was active now, since missions were usually unlocked only after the tutorial. If he secured first place in the domination tutorial, he would earn 1,000 achievement points. Kim thought the kind of challenge was expected from a ruler of Olympus. Seeing the reward, he became determined to take first place. Looking up, he decided to call out to Zeus. He asked for an extra 100 points for entertainment, but in response, he received a wave of lightning. As he started walking, he thought that Zeus was pretty stingy for a ruler. The trees were stained. A body was on the ground with an arrow in its neck. The archer above the corpses said that easy kills were always welcome. Grabbing his arrows, he said that consumable items from the Great League were the best. The guild had only told him to survive and return, but that wasn't enough. He'd wondered bitterly how he could have been expelled from the academy. It was impossible that he was still just a mere member. He decided to make them regret discarding a talent like him. Kim walked through the forest. Reaching a specific spot, he said that it should be here. In front of him was a stream. Looking at it, he shouted that he had found it. That place brought him memories of war, but he didn't know this Minhyun watching him. Aiming his arrow, the young man thought it was a jackpot, an unarmed person standing there. He assumed that his target must have been weak since he had no armor. Smiling, he thanked fate for the quick kill. His arrow shot swiftly toward the young man. However, Kim noticed the movement. He raised a wall of water to defend himself. Without much effort, he quickly located his opponent in the tree above and prepared to snap his fingers. Minhyun is knocked out of the tree at that very moment, letting out a scream. Falling and quickly getting back up, he becomes irritated and realizes that Kim was a mage. Since Kim had no equipment, the young man decides to attack him again. But before he can make his move, he is attacked. Kim tells him that his movements weren't bad. He says he aimed for his head and that losing to someone like that should be satisfying. Minhyun curses in anger. He charges at Kim, dodging his attacks. Kim says that a rank B trait includes fast reflexes, surprising Minhyun that he knew that. As the young man was about to attack, a stone wall rises, piercing straight through him. Trembling, he tries to speak but fails. Simon asks if he was trying to talk about the Awakened Academy. Snapping his fingers again, he says that a place like that would never accept him. Looking at the equipment on the body on the ground, he says that Minhyun must have been from some famous guild because the equipment was high quality. If this were an official arena match, he would be dead. In official arenas, losing wasn't just a defeat. It meant real-world death, not just disconnection. But that wasn't even the worst part. If an arena wasn't completed, it triggered a surge in the affiliated country. In dungeons and raids, the undefeated monster would be unleashed on Earth. That's why the number of rankers after official arenas became a measure of national power. After the incident, Korea failed to stop a breach and followed the path of other smaller nations into ruin. But since that hadn't happened yet, Kim decided to focus on the present. He checked the rankings. In first place was Kang Hoang with 2 kills, and in second place was Lee Seon with only 1. Simon wonders why the kill count was so low since the tutorial had been active for a while. He thinks that everyone must be waiting. The participants were high level, judging by their equipment, so he should be cautious. It seems someone had already entered the capture zone, and to win this mode, capturing zones was more important than kills. Kim decides to use the time he had to familiarize himself with production abilities. Walking, he says he could get a few more kills. It was time to eliminate everyone hiding in the bushes. In the middle of the forest, one of the players was running. He used all the breath he had to escape. Looking back, he thought it was madness. He called his pursuer insane before being struck by a pointed rock. Kim says that the other player's speed was normal, that he was running fast even with armor, and wondered if he had some kind of speed ability. He says he wouldn't have noticed him if he had attacked first, but he doesn't realize someone was stalking him from behind a tree. Quickly, the person lunges at him with a sword in hand. But upon noticing him, Kim snaps his fingers and the pointed rock pierces for the attacker as well. Looking at the young man, Kim calls him a hyena for always targeting easy opponents. The system informs him that repetitive creation has improved his crafting skill and that the Philosopher's Stone has leveled up. He thinks that stat increases were normal, but he didn't expect the stone to level up. He says that hunting those who stayed outside the camp was a good idea. With that, he was now level 11 and wouldn't get stabbed in the back anymore. Ahead of him was the occupied territory, so he decides to enter. Kim walked carelessly through the area. Suddenly, something caught his attention. Hiding behind a tree, he wondered what it was. There were many dead bodies, yet this wasn't an occupied territory. He decides to check the arena leaderboard. The domination points for the top 4 were nearly the same. They all had rankings from the start of the tutorial, meaning they had been practicing since the beginning. Steinman wonders if they had formed an alliance. That was a major rule violation. Even if they wanted to rank up, forming an alliance in the tutorial was illegal. Looking more closely, he wonders where they were and if they had set up camp inside the occupied territory. They had tanks in the front, archers in the back, and a warrior swordsman on each side. He thought it would be difficult to play a hyena in that position. Kim was just trying to secure the mission rewards. Activating his skill, he says that he had no other choice. If they were going to play like that, then he would have to play dirty too. Seon was observing the area. Her companion asks if she saw anything, and the girl says that no one had appeared. Laughing, he asks if she was running out of aura, and she responds that clairvoyance uses mana, not aura. He says it must be nice to be able to use skills while conserving mana. The two argue because she says he had a low kill count, and he says the others had 5 or more, which was irritating. She comments that he was the one who chose to be a tank, which makes him very annoyed. They keep arguing when someone appears and tells them to stop. He says that Jae-won had more than 60% of the domination points, so he would let him get more kills. Hearing that, the young man is startled. Excited, he says that he trusted him. The girl asks if they could leave already since most of the participants were already gone. She says that it was frustrating to just sit there, and the man begins to think. She asks if he was worried about Kim Simon, but she tells him to relax because she knew all the guild's beginners and hadn't found any trace of him. The man says that was the problem because some guy he didn't know had 11 kills. Saya tells him not to worry since everyone who fought them was trash. She then comments that if he were really strong, he would have occupied the territory sooner. Grabbing his arm, she asks him to maintain formation and check the area since they had trained so much. He closes his eyes thinking about it. After being eliminated in the last tutorial, they trained while grinding their teeth, and the Jungle Guild helped them with equipment. As he thought about the alliance, the girl interrupts him, asking him to add more confidence. She says that they were a team and that there was a guy they had never heard of. But as she spoke, something caught her attention, and she saw someone behind a tree near where they were. Grabbing her bow and arrow, she announces that he was there. The man is confused, but already firing, she says she could see where he was hiding. The arrow flies directly toward the tree where she saw him. However, Kim notices the movement. When it hits the tree, arrow splits in 2 and falls at the player's feet. Seon is shocked by what happened. The swordsman, surprised, asks if he was from the magic class. He says he tried to hide it. Then he speaks about the girl's clairvoyance, startling her that he knew about it. Kim says that he studied the abilities. Using her skill on her bow and arrow, she asks the player if he can show her what she doesn't know. But someone interrupts. Walking toward him, the man asks if he was Kim Simon. Kim asks who he was, and the man introduces himself as Kang Hoyeon. The young man says that since he was in first place, he assumed he was the leader. Hoyeon grabs his sword and says he won't waste his breath. Extending his hand, he invites Kim to join his team. The others ask if he was crazy and how he could trust the guy. Kang says that Kim had 11 kills without equipment, and that his magic trait had to be at least rank S or higher, so he would let him take first place. The girl grabs his arm and says that if the player betrayed them, they were screwed. Kang says that the benefits outweighed the risks of forming a team with a magic user. Besides, mages were rare even in their guild. On top of that, he had 11 kills. He was good at combat since that number was absurd. He tells Simum to think long-term because with a mage on his team, his position in the guild would rise. Scratching his head, the player asks why they assumed he would accept. They are confused, and Kim says they were assuming he would naturally say yes. Placing his hand on his head, the leader apologizes, but the young man says he knew the arrogance of mages and he wasn't like that. So Kang asks what the problem was. Kim says the issue was joining a team. Hoyam asks again, and the young man says that it was a rule violation and they would have problems if it were televised. Kang says it doesn't matter and that they shouldn't care about public opinion when there wasn't even a punishment. Kim says that judging by their equipment, they must be from a reputable guild and asks how they would handle that. Irritated, the leader tells him that he only killed weaklings and was now acting like the best. His jungle guild only cared about efficiency. If the results were good, nothing else mattered. They were a group of 4 and their qualities were different from those they had hunted. Pointing at Kim, he asked him again to join the team and says it was his last chance. Removing his hood, Kim says that was typical of the guild and that there was no reason to talk anymore. Aiming at the leader, he warns him to be careful. Then he snaps his fingers and a wave of lightning surrounds him, followed by a powerful bolt striking the ground, destroying everything around. They shield themselves, and when they open their eyes, they see the spear. Grabbing it, Kim says that first place was already his and that he wouldn't lower himself to join a team. With his sword in hand, the leader says that negotiations have failed. He turns and shouts for Sion. She says she knew it and aims her arrow. It is fired directly toward Kim at high speed. Kim says it's a pity and calls for Astrape, causing a rain of lightning to fall and a vortex to form. He charges toward the guild, creating a loud crash and an explosion of light as it strikes them. Seeing everyone on the ground, he smiles. He is pleased because that was only 10% of the power. But he notices something strange, and when he realizes it, the leader is already running toward him. Simon points Astrape at Hoyam, who is dashing toward him with precision, both using their abilities. At the sight of their clash, a purple aura forms, covering everything around them. Seconds later, it dissipates. Kang had used shadow movement. That was how he dodged the attack. While Kim was looking ahead, he didn't realize that the man was right behind him. Hoyam prepares his sword for the final strike. Then he shouts for the young man to die and uses all his strength. Without looking back, Kim snaps his fingers. Immediately, the stone emerges from the ground, piercing Hoyam with its sharp point. Trembling, the player asks how that was possible. How could Kim still have mana after using such a strong ratio-based magic? Kim says that it was different and tells them to leave. It was becoming a waste of time. Lightning surged into the skies. Above him, the system emits a signal that he has reached 100% capture points and the area's owner has been claimed, thus ending the tutorial. Simon took first place and received the title Tutorial Monarch, earning 100 achievement points and completing Zeus' mission. In addition to Zeus' 1,000 points, if he hadn't used Astrape, he could have claimed the full amount. The Constellation Zeus was pleased with his performance. He received an additional 100 points, and when he returned to the real world, his rewards for completing the tutorial would be waiting for him. Since he had gained so much from the tutorial, he was excited for what was coming next. In the special city of Seoul, Jungle Guild headquarters, the guild representative calls for the leader. Crushing a piece of paper, he asks if any of it made sense to them. He says they weren't fighting against a hyena, nor did they run into another team member. And yet, they still lost a battle against some random guy without any equipment. Hoyang says that he has nothing to say. The guildmaster says that he doesn't criticize anyone for lacking skill, because that's something money can't buy. Walking up and slapping Kang across the face, he says that they lost after forming a team. That was something he couldn't let slide. He shouts that forming a team tarnished their reputation and asks if Hoyang understood what that meant. Faced with the master's anger, the team leader simply apologizes. The master throws a contract on the table, and the young man picks it up in shock. The master explains that it's a contract they prepared for players like them, those who failed the tutorial and tarnished the guild's name. Since they lost for 10 years, all their rewards would go to Jungle Guild, so he tells them to read and sign. Jiwon comments that the contract seems a bit harsh. The man immediately grabs him by the neck. He says that idiots always invite suffering and asks if he wants to die. Sweating, the young man apologizes. The others watch in terror and Kang tells them to just sign it. In the special city of Seoul, Sungsum Guild headquarters, Park Minkyul says that he can't decide. He tells the boys that he doesn't blame them, that the situation is difficult to understand. One of them says that the idea of a player casting magic without chanting was shocking, but the biggest shock was that he got 15 kills. Another says that he did it all alone and wiped out the 4 biggest teams. Minkyul says he will handle the details in the report and tells them they are dismissed. They are surprised, but he explains that their guild doesn't punish players for failing a tutorial. The 3 of them exchange excited glances. The manager tells them to do better next time, and they agree. After they leave, the young men exit the room, leaving the guild master alone. Reading the report, he couldn't believe that one person took down 4 teams alone. He decides to ask Yanhee what she thinks. She simply says that they are at work. Smiling, the man jokes that if he called her assistant manager Wu, it would be funny. Smiling while stacking papers on the table, she says that she won't do it. Looking at a few players, he asks if they were from Jungle Guild. The woman confirms that they were, and 3 of them had rank B traits, while 1 had rank A. Minchul asks how a guild known for its lack of sportsmanship attracts so much talent. Then he rephrases his question and asks how a single person managed to defeat a team of that caliber. The 2 of them discuss Kim's level and how he could have that kind of firepower without a casting time. She says that the young man activated magic with a snap of his fingers, and that he must be at least rank as or higher. The man comments that there's only one way to find out. There's a limit to what a level 1 could do, no matter how good their skills were. There was something more to it. Yoni hypothesizes that it might be a constellation, and he says that was the only explanation. She argues that the guy was level 1 and had just completed the tutorial. It was impossible for him to have the support of a constellation. Since the emergence of the arenas in 2015, constellations had only appeared for diamond ranks or higher. Park suggests that the player might be different, or that something else was helping him. He then says that the best course of action would be to recruit him. The woman remarks that other guilds would act as well, and laughing, the man tells her she would have to try harder. Turning around, he asks the master if he agreed. Sensing a presence, the woman becomes nervous. Beside them, a strong light emanates. Stepping out of the portal, the woman says that since it was just the two of them, she could be addressed as Miss. Smiling, she asks how he noticed her presence since she was using an A-rank artifact. Minchil replies that he only noticed when she mentioned Kim Simon. He then asks why she was there and if she wasn't about to graduate soon. Sitting at the table, the woman says she was bored and that the academy didn't mean that much to her. The man tells her to enter the arena instead of spying, and she replies that she had just finished a match. She asks if he hadn't watched the live stream, but turning to the table, he says he had an urgent report and apologizes. Picking up the clipboard from the table, the woman tells him there was no need to apologize. Yuzhang asks if that was the report that had surprised him, and the manager does everything he can to prevent her from looking, saying the information was confidential. Reading it, the woman says that the guild belonged to her anyway. Even so, the man still tries to stop her while she refuses to back down. She lifts the clipboard to read it as the manager protests. When she sees Kim Simon's name, she is shocked. The portal opens and Kim materializes back. Lying on the bed, he feels relieved that it was over. Judging by his appearance, he might have reached level 3 even without the Philosopher's Stone. Strength, agility, and endurance were still insufficient compared to the power of alchemy. The difference was significant, but in truth, it was a good thing. The lower his level, and the higher the level of the Philosopher's Stone, the greater his advantage in the arena. In arenas where players of similar levels fought, everyone was level 3. So he wonders if he could secretly hide his additional levels. That would be a better specification than any innate attribute. He decides to check his titles and notices that his hadn't changed. The girl gets irritated when she sees hers, as Malsuk had said she fought hard to make her title grow. Then suddenly a new title appears, Ruler of the Tutorial. There were no other options, but that was how titles usually looked. They were undervalued, and it was strange that he had received one. Still, he couldn't say it was a loss. The achievement shop was unlocked at the other rank or higher, and collecting titles was essential to buying stats. Simon wonders if he should invest his remaining stats. Would it be ideal to invest everything in transmutation power, since the Philosopher's Stone didn't solve the fundamental law of equivalent exchange in alchemy? He needed to spend 500 more points, and to solve that, he required greater transmutation power, but he couldn't ignore physical stats either. He should at least raise them to the awakening average of 5 and consider allocating stats separately. While adjusting the system, he suddenly notices something. Placing his hand on his chest, he asks the Philosopher's Stone if it could transmute anything. Instantly, the stone begins to respond. After the answer, he asks if human transmutation was possible. But this time, it does not respond. Kim understands the lack of response since human transmutation was a taboo in alchemy. Chimeras were the most notable result of human transmutation, but sometimes they appeared as monsters in the arena. However, they could certainly be used for beneficial purposes, just as science had advanced on Earth in the 21st century. When the stone begins to speak again, the young man wonders if he would use it solely for good. His plan was to use it only to become stronger, but if he ever found himself in a difficult situation, he couldn't promise anything. After all, he had a goal he needed to reach. The stone begins to warn him, but he says he is fully aware of the dangers of transmutation. However, that wasn't what the stone was concerned about. There was an item that was the opposite of the Emerald Tablet, possessing a type of knowledge akin to the stones. When he first obtained the Emerald Tablet, he remembered taking a qualification test. He was only able to obtain it at level 1 due to its bound nature, which made it unusable by anyone else. To be more precise, it killed anyone unqualified for its ownership. If he hadn't qualified, he would have burned to ashes. Sitting down, Kim asks the stone if it was worried that he hadn't qualified for the transmutation item. Frustrated, he wonders if he could just forget about it. However, the stone says it could partially block the penalty for not meeting the qualifications. Worried, he asks if it could at least prevent death. But now he was a professional player. As long as he didn't die, he could recover one way or another. First, he invests all his remaining attribute points into alchemy power and asks the stone for an approximate image of the transmutation material. Looking at the image, he notes that it was a different color from the Emerald Tablet. Then he says he is ready and begins. The color was dark purple, and it should function like the screen of a modern smartphone, making navigation easier. As expected, the system states that his alchemy was insufficient to perform the requested transmutation. However, he hadn't expected that to establish an equivalent exchange. He would need 10,000 achievement points. Nervous, he asks if that was considered cheap. He tells the stone that Astrape had only cost 500 points. He had worked hard to save up 12,300 points and was about to lose a large portion of them. Clicking to accept, he says he had no choice. Without risks, there would be no rewards. The system deducts 10,000 points and energy begins to rise through his hand, startling him. A familiar energy starts flowing through his body and out of his fingers. In front of him, a purple smoke begins to swirl around, turning into tentacles that wrap around his body. Several messages appear, including the title Pioneer of Alchemy. The energy consumption of synthesis was reduced by 5%. Not only would the percentage efficiency increase as the level rose, but as the title grew, the reduction would also improve over time. In conclusion, the ability to reduce synthesis energy consumption was an incredibly powerful option. Several other messages appear, and he looks at the object in his hand, confused. It was a replica of the Obsidian Tablet, a collection of human synthesis. To his disappointment, he discovered that he had spent 1,000 achievement points and the replica was only at 20%. Even Astrape had been 10% complete for just 500 points. Placing a hand on his head, he wonders if the synthesized item couldn't be recovered. The stone tells him it was irreversible and permanent, so assuming that achievement points increased it by 20% every 10,000 points. If he did this 4 more times, he could reach a mythical grade. Looking at the object and smiling, he thinks that it was insane. In his chest, the stone starts to warn him, but he says he had already prepared for the penalties that could occur if he wasn't qualified. With a single tap on his phone, he could contact his brother. Kin was accustomed to pain and had endured the suffering of the arena's disease. Intense and unbearable pain had been his lifelong companion. Touching the object, he thinks that if his guess was correct, there would be no penalty. The tablet begins to emit a strong light with inscriptions appearing on it, and once again, tentacles coil around his arm. As expected, he felt no pain. The original owner seemed to have an interest in him, so the relic wouldn't harm him. To his surprise, the obsidian tablet requests fusion with the Philosopher's stone. The tentacles wrap around his body, making him writhe in pain, and the stone begins to speak. The stone accepts the fusion request, and the tentacles penetrate his chest. He collapses to the ground, desperate from the intensity of the fusion, as the tentacles pass through his body. From the outside, his screams of agony can be heard. The system begins to display messages about changes in the stone and its classification. In the galactic arena, there were 50 participants for the attack event. Once all participants were gathered, the arena would begin. Minyoung had just finished a tutorial and was immediately placed into an offensive event, wondering if there was a condition for cooperation. Thinking about Simon, he believed that it was because of him since he had been eliminated so quickly. In a way, this was an opportunity. He might have another chance to secure the promising talent he had lost last time. While he was thinking, other players started to appear. 3 of them walked together, discussing why they couldn't attack. One of them says his MMR was too high and asks if he had ranked up during the tutorial. His teammate says it was his fault, but the man tells him to calm down, saying he would take care of it. Minhyung observes them when he suddenly gets startled by the emblem on their clothes. It was the Scorpion Guild. No matter the ranking, there were always bad players and famous trolls, but that guild had a league of its own. They had formed a great force, but their bad manners were accompanied by a peculiar philosophy and logic. They claimed it was meticulous pragmatism for victory, but in reality, they were just punks indulging in all kinds of misbehavior. Disappointed, he thought he no longer had the chance to be a promising rookie. Beside him, a man appeared, confused to see only him there, as he had been told it would be a group of 5 men. They started mocking Kim for being alone while he thought about how arrogant they were. One of them looked at the name Sung Sam on his armor and spoke loudly. The other 2 were surprised and asked Gaio if it was true. He then asked Minyoung for his name, and the young man introduced himself. Repeating his name, he commented that he had never heard of him before. Now more serious, he said he was just a rookie who had barely completed the tutorial. Irritating him further, he added that Sung wouldn't give a member equipment lower than rank C. Mocking him, they commented about corporations being flexible, and the young man seemed to have no rank at all. Growing more irritated, he thought he needed to control himself. As much as he wanted to kill the 3 of them, they were stronger, and he would end up losing. Placing a hand on his shoulder, the man told them to do exactly as they had said. Even more annoyed, he realized they were planning to take all the rewards for themselves. At that moment, a portal began to open behind them, intriguing them. From it, Simon emerged, hood over his head. The young man was surprised to see him there. Gaio began mocking the fact that people were being thrown into the arena without equipment. Smiling, Kim asked if he was talking about him. Pointing his mace at him, he asked who he was. As he was about to answer, the Philosopher's stone began to glow in his chest. It started questioning who the disgusting guy in front of it was. Besides insults, it began threatening the young man, leaving him with no way out. Caressing the stone, he wondered why his heart ached. As he stroked the stone, it said it couldn't do anything since it was being treated so tenderly. When he stopped, it started bouncing, begging for more. If he had known that would happen, he would have interrupted the fusion, no matter the consequences. From the outside, the men watched, wondering what he was doing and if they had scared him too much. Placing the mace on the ground, Gaio asked if the young man was afraid. The other 2 started mocking him, saying he was scared and didn't belong to a guild. The player said he wasn't some soft-hearted fool and smiled. Kim asked if that was what this was all about. He stepped forward and said the other was mistaken about his equipment. Breaking the ground with his mace, the man asked if he was trying to call him an idiot. Seven told him that magic or support classes often didn't have proper equipment. Paying closer attention, he realized his opponent was from the Scorpion Guild. When the other asked if he would drop the formal tone, Kim said he wouldn't show respect to someone who wasn't human. The man became furious, calling him a parasite. Approaching, he said Kim was looking down on them. Grabbing his mace and rushing toward the player, he said he would crush his head, but Kim stopped him with just a snap of his fingers. His arm became stronger and he blocked the weapon before it could hit him. Simon wondered how he was losing to such a pathetic guy. Kim believed his agility came from speed, so he asked if strength was his main attribute. Trembling from the other's power, he noticed that he didn't even flinch. At that moment, his allies drew their swords to help him. But before one of them could, Sangmin was stabbed from behind by Minyoung. His friend screamed his name in despair. Enraged, he called the young man a bastard and charged at him. He didn't make it, as he was also attacked from behind by another person. Seeing his fallen comrades, Simon panicked. All of his strength and agility, along with his B rank or higher equipment, had been stopped by a guy using only one hand. Trying to hold on to his mace, he asked why the other was so strong. Kim asked if he still had the strength to scream and broke his weapon with just one hand. Seeing the shattered mace, he quickly looked up in shock. Now holding the weapon, Kim saw the fear in his face and said he liked it, but he shouldn't hold a grudge since he attacked first. With a single move, Simon was killed. The arena had a high difficulty level due to the high MNR, but on the other hand, that meant the rewards were greater. The fewer members in the compensation group, the more rewards they would receive. That was why they had been so aggressive about his equipment. Kim had used the Over's body tissue with a completion rate of 15%. The risk of having that qualification was high, but having an Over's arm without transforming into one was perfect. If not for the preservation of his appearance, he wouldn't have accepted the fusion. Thinking about it, he said he liked that part. Then he realized someone was watching him. He asked the young man if he was the last teammate, and nervously, he said yes. Kim asked if he had known him before since he looked familiar, and the young man said he was in the tutorial. When asked if he had seen him near the lake, Minhyung got excited and introduced himself, saying that the guild had analyzed him to work with him. Hearing the name of the guild, Kim remembered Yujong and became thoughtful. The young man asked if something was wrong, and Kim commented that he had just lost himself in thought. Shaking his hand, Kim said they should do their best together, and the young man asked if it would just be the two of them. That mode required cooperation between 5 men. The 3 had died after the match started, so the system wouldn't assign replacements. However, to his surprise, the system started the arena, announcing that all participants had been found. Staring with his mouth open, he thought it was insane. Still in shock, the 2 were teleported to another setting. Kim told him to keep moving since they were outnumbered compared to the other teams. When he read that Zeus and the Black Goat were watching him, the player was surprised. He was intrigued because he wasn't even high level, he was just taking a leveling test. Constellations didn't constantly watch their own sponsored players. The system issued a warning that the area was infested with goblins and needed to be cleared. The control point was a bridge that varied slightly in shape depending on the map and had a fortress on top of it. Checkpoint structures usually only appear in platinum rank levels and above, not here. Thinking it through, everyone had exceeded the levels of placement tests, so it was possible since they all had high standards. If it was a fair match, it could be a special control point just for them. The good part was that the rewards would definitely be worth it. Since he had come this far, Kim was going to eliminate them and take all the kill rewards. Turning back, he got his teammates' attention. He asked if he wanted to collect some kills. Minhyung said he had just finished the tutorial and didn't want to kill goblins. He just wanted to get rewards safely. Excited, Kim said they should create strategies together and thought he could monopolize the kills. From inside the fortress, 2 goblins came out excitedly, talking about how their boss was in a bad mood. Kim appeared above them before they noticed, quickly jumping onto their backs and slamming them down hard. He used the Black Panther ability, which gave him the strength of 1, instantly killing them. He had never imagined that the goblins wouldn't notice him, especially since they were excellent at hearing sounds. Synthesizing multiple bodies was very demanding, but the fact that he was handling them was already insane. Arriving at his side, Minhyung asked if they could really do this alone. Simon said he had checked before the ambush, and their weapons were just stones and poison needles. As long as they didn't pierce his armor and they followed the plan, they would be fine. Entering the fortress, he told him to follow. A group of goblins was eating meat, talking about how delicious it was while others were celebrating. One of them noticed movement approaching. Minhyung rushed toward them with his sword. They ordered everyone to attack the humans, but they noticed that the young man was alone and announced it while throwing stones at him. He tried to protect himself from the stones and shouted, asking if that was all they had. Using bamboo spears, they said he was trapped and couldn't get through. The player ended up surrounded by dozens of monsters rushing to attack him. With all his determination, he began striking down those who approached. One managed to hit him because he wasn't paying attention to his back. He needed to hold out a little longer, so he used his sword to try to threaten and strike them. At his limit, he screamed with all his strength that it was time. Dropping Astrape, a bolt of lightning struck the goblins. They tried to flee, but all of them were hit at once and defeated. The Philosopher's stone minimized the backlash, and his 50 achievement points were restored. Shocked, Minhyung asked how that was possible, but his teammate didn't answer as the system window popped up. He was confused about his achievement points, but the stone asked if he didn't know about the backlash. Material damage interfered with the backlash, and to achieve more, he needed to reach at least a B grade. Above his head, the system announced that Zeus approved his use of Astrape and rewarded him with 100 achievement points. Kim was surprised that he had received sponsorship without a broadcast. Considering the completion rate with the obsidian, it worked well, so he thanks Zeus for the sponsorship. He couldn't use it again, which made him sad. Even if he spent all his investments, the backlash would persist. The 2 left the dungeon when a bright yellow light shone behind them. Minhyung noticed the glow and was surprised. Pointing at it, he said that was the target point and that they should get out of there. Smiling, Kim told him to go first. The player asked if he wouldn't come back and warned him that the goblins were regrouping and returning, then asked if he was okay. Kim said he was fine and that he would join his teammate after finishing things there. Watching the player walk away, he shouted for him to visit his guild, saying they would return the favor. As he left, he thanked him and the young man smiled. In front of him, several armed goblins appeared, ready to attack. Stretching his arms, Kim told them to finish it. What he didn't expect was that a larger goblin with a spear would try to attack him, but he managed to dodge in time. That was the chief, which made the others excited and left Kim surprised. Angry, the monster growled and charged at him. Kim, startled, wondered why a hobgoblin was there. Remembering the system message, he understood what it meant. Hobgoblins were monsters that emerged when elite goblins were influenced by dark energy, and the bridge was prone to such occurrences. Thinking that monster was an exaggeration, he activated the Black Panther ability. Running to avenge his subordinates, the hobgoblin swung his axe, barely missing Kim and shattering the wall beside him. Dodging the second attack, Kim wondered why it was so easy. Overall, his physical capabilities were lower than those of a real hobgoblin. Wondering if it had been nerfed, he thought they seemed to have some awareness, which was a relief. Achievement points could be wasted, but he decided to take precautions and called for the stone. Above his head, the system announced that Zeus was attacking the black goat. Then it said the black goat expressed dissatisfaction, pointing at the obsidian tablet. The notifications distracted him, and when he realized it, the monster was right in front of him, attacking with full force, making a loud crash. He managed to dodge, but was surprised by the goblin's power. The black goat Constellation gave him a mission in the middle of combat, which intrigued him. It was dissatisfied that he was only using Zeus's lightning, so it requested that he finish the round using only human synthesis. When the monster roared in fury, the system announced that his reward would be 500 achievement points. Dodging the attack, he was surprised by the number of points for that kind of mission. He understood that it was a matter of pride, ever since he became an alchemist. Stopping in front of the goblin, he spoke aloud, saying he accepted the mission. The black goat Constellation smiled with satisfaction, and Kim smiled back. However, the Zeus Constellation was furious, but the goat threatened to visit him. The two began arguing, making the atmosphere heavy. While they argued, a monster grew irritated with Kim, thinking he was mocking it. Looking at his hand, Kim thought about using only human synthesis. With excitement, he realized it wasn't impossible. He quickly charged at his opponent. The two ran toward each other, and Kim used the ogre's tissue to punch the goblin. The hobgoblin used its shield to protect itself. When the punch landed on the shield, it shattered instantly. Seeing the scene, the goblin told Kim that he had guts. Kim took advantage of the position to grab his head. He screamed and began squeezing with all his strength. The spectators started laughing and saying their boss was the best. They used bamboo darts to strike his back. Held by the head and wounded in the back, Kim remained silent as the goblin asked what he thought of the situation. The monster said that humans were inferior beings, that they were so pathetic that he had fallen for a simple trick and had no resistance to paralyzing poison. Still holding him, the goblin said he would start by cutting off his limbs. But before he could do anything, his arm was gripped tightly. Noticing that the other was moving, the monster was startled. Kim's body began to emit a green light, leaving the goblin confused. Sweating, he said it was impossible since Kim was just a human. Using the ogre's tissue, Simon squeezed his arm until it snapped and pulled it apart, tearing it in two. Screaming in pain, the goblin fell to his knees. Then he realized his neck was being gripped with the same strength as his arm. Standing over him, Kim said that goblins were inferior creatures that fell for simple tricks. They stared at each other, and Kim asked if his opponent agreed. The goblin only growled. With a single squeeze, his head shattered just like his arm, and Kim won the battle. He fell to the ground with a loud crash. The others were devastated and shocked to see their boss in that state. The Black Goat Constellation's mission was completed, and he earned 500 points. It expressed great satisfaction that he had used human synthesis and rewarded him with an additional 500 points. Stating that the system referred to the goblin as a hidden boss, he thought that it wasn't just meant to be defeated. The system announced that the Galactic Arena was talking about him, and he recalled something similar happening when he activated the obsidian tablet. He wondered if having the attention of the Galactic Arena was a good thing. Kim decided to think positively since the arena always ensured a balance between risk and reward. Although there was nothing he could do about it at the moment, it was time to claim his reward. Simon returned home. The system began announcing various rewards and everything he had accomplished alone in the arena, leaving him surprised. He earned 1,000 achievement points for killing the first boss. Reading his status, he thought he would reach 10,000 points quickly. He asked the stone if he could synthesize the obsidian tablet again. It responded that he could, but the points and growth percentage would change. With years of experience, he could refine it, but the cost would increase each time he upgraded it, meaning he needed to invest a bit more. That investment was unavoidable because, unlike Astrape, the obsidian tablet was permanent. Once used, it could be used infinitely, and its power in human transmutation was undeniable. The stone confirmed that the 20% growth rate would still apply with 10,000 points. Hearing that, he got excited, realizing that his transmutation power would double compared to what he had now. However, he thought it was best to save some points during synthesis. After all, achievement points were his primary resource. Clear rewards didn't grant arena points, he only received them occasionally through broadcasts or arena cleanups. He was still in the leveling test phase, and with this, his total alchemy power reached 17, while the Philosopher's Stone's level increased from 5 to 7. Excited, he said it was now time for the main course and opened his inventory to see what he had obtained. Kim had acquired the Goblin's Battle Axe, an item favored by players. Its item options matched those at Platinum qualification and even added +5 strength. Normally, strength stats increased by only +1 to +3, so most items would fetch the best prices, making it quite profitable. It hadn't been long since he had regressed, but it felt like he hadn't seen something like this in ages. As he reached for something on the screen, the stone asked what he was talking about. He pulled out a hobgoblin serum, and the stone questioned why it was there. It asked if he had endured the pain using potions before synthesizing it. The side effects of magical incapacity caused indescribable pain, and he had always relied on anesthetic potions to endure it. That serum was one of the main ingredients in anesthetic potions. The stone asked why he hadn't drunk it earlier since he had an elixir. Looking at a photo of his brother, Kim said he had his reasons. The stone said he should prioritize his health, but thanks to his choice, the synthesis had been done under nearly perfect conditions. Kim said that if he hadn't used the elixir as a base, the regression would have been impossible. The stone commented that even constellations couldn't achieve that. Placing a hand on his chest, he asked what the stone had done to make regression possible. The stone started to say something about what could enable such a thing. Since it couldn't speak about it openly, it cut itself off mid-sentence and only mentioned that constellations were warriors. Kim decided to drop the question since he wouldn't be able to get an answer. The stone noted that the galactic arena was already bombarding him with messages, warning him not to bring it up again. It then asked what he planned to do with the serum. Lying on his bed, Kim said he was thinking about transforming the anesthetic into an elixir. Since in alchemy, poison could be used for healing. Excited, the stone began talking about the benefits the elixir could bring, leaving Kim exhausted. After asking it to calm down, the stone asked if it had said something unnecessary. The next day, Kim stood in front of a massive building, now part of the galactic arena, a sanctuary for players. His stone asked if it had been donated by the arena, and the player explained that the arena directly managed the broadcasting side of things. As he entered, a woman approached him, asking if he was awake. Smiling, she said they were doing an inventory check and asked him to place an item for later retrieval. He opened his inventory and retrieved the elixir. After verification, the woman handed him the player's watch, and the stone remarked that it had been a while. The watch had functions for keeping records of personal accounts, transaction history, and data, including recruitments. She tried to explain how the watch worked, but he cut her off, saying he had used it before. Many people were there, but they weren't all players. Without an inventory, they couldn't enter. Going up to the shopping district, which was exclusive to players, he said he had things to sell there. Inside the elevator, the other players were talking about a new batch of trainees who were the best so far. Hyuk and Lee Yu-jong were the top contenders and had already been ranked since they broke into Diamond Tier just 4 years after their debut. They arrived at the 4th floor and the doors opened. Kim stepped out smiling while one of them mentioned how envious he felt. When asked, he simply said it was funny. Walking around, the stone commented on how different the shops were. The two talked about sales and it asked why they didn't sell through auctions. When something fell into the school uniform category, it was almost impossible to auction it, and most prices were already fixed. In front of a store, Kim said it was cleaner to deal with major guilds. When he entered, a young man greeted him. Looking around, he thought about how elegant and clean it was. Smiling, the man asked if he was looking for something. Kim said he was there to sell something. Somewhat confused, the vendor commented that it had been a while since someone had come there to sell. As he asked what it was, the player placed the goblin's battle axe on the table, startling him. Holding and analyzing it, the vendor said it was a high-level auction. A screen displaying the prices of axes appeared in front of them. Seeing the price of 42 million, Kim was astonished. The man said he had sold one for 38 million, but this one had +4 strength. Somewhat skeptical, the vendor asked how Kim had obtained it. He was a production player and commented that Kim didn't seem like a high-level player. He asked for Kim's level, and he replied that he was level 7, making the vendor even more suspicious. Convinced, he asked if Kim wanted to receive the full value of the piece without arena points. When Kim mentioned that he had acquired the item in the arena, the man laughed, not believing that a level 7 had obtained a platinum tier item. He moved toward a red button, saying that security would show up and the real owner of the stolen item would appear. But he also mentioned that people like Kim often found themselves in unfortunate circumstances, so he was willing to help. The man offered 10 million in cash to buy the item at that price, assuring that he wouldn't press the button. Of course, he also expected Kim to stay quiet about it. Smiling, he asked him to make a choice. Simon tried to say something but was interrupted by a woman calling the manager's attention. Lee Yu-jong asked the man if he had gotten bold since becoming a manager. Outside, the woman handed Kim a soda. Kim started thinking about the hand that was holding the soda. 9 years ago, Jung's hand had held a hammer stained with strawberry juice. That was the hammer that had crushed his grandfather's head, the unforgettable horrors of that day. Not just President Lee, but also the heads of several other officials who had gathered there. That incident was seen as the turning point that led to South Korea's downfall. The shock he had felt that day still remained clearly in his mind. She was a completely different person from the one he had known. Seeing that he hadn't taken the soda, the girl asked if his taste had changed, to which he only replied that he was lost in thought. Looking at him, she commented that his older brother hadn't changed. He always got lost in thought when he concentrated. Smiling, she said it was thanks to him that she learned the charm of a man dedicated to something. Drinking the soda, Kim remarked that she was still the same. At that moment, one of the women called out to her friend. She had sent the details of the deposit she had requested, and Lee began to examine it. Shocked, she said the contents were a bit different from what she had expected. Daeon confirmed that the document was correct, making her thoughtful. Looking at the 50 million figure, she said she had done well. The woman told Kim that it was the payment for the axe he had sold, surprising him because it was such a high price. Lowering her head, she said it was compensation for what her employee had done, and she had wanted to give him even more. Smiling, Kim said it was fine and that business matters should remain separate from personal ones. Jung looked at him and said that since he hadn't changed, she could have that conversation with him. Kim wondered what had happened. Since they hadn't seen each other in a long time, maybe it wasn't so strange. The two walked out together. Awkwardly, he asked how his aunt was doing. Lee Yu said she was still unconscious but doing well, and that she visited her regularly. He asked if she wasn't just going to the arena to run around. She admitted that she had used the excuse of visiting her to play in the arena and had even installed a dedicated access device in her hospital room. Changing the subject, the woman asked if he had obtained that item in the arena before, and he confirmed. Concerned, she asked if his body had recovered, and the young man revealed that his magical incapacity had been cured, which made her happy. Feeling a little shy, she congratulated him and commented that she was being dramatic, then decided to ask him something. Looking at him seriously, she asked how he had recovered. After thinking for a moment, he said he had just been lucky and felt his magic slowly returning until he was healed. Zhang was overjoyed since she had searched for methods but never found any. He said that the effort he had put in over the years was enough and told her not to worry. He commented that it was an accident and that he had only done what was natural. That was enough, and it had been his choice at the time. Even if he could go back in time, his choice wouldn't change. As he said that, he mocked himself because despite claiming he had no regrets, he hadn't answered his siblings that day. Eternal pressures weren't non-existent. He was already the son of an outsider, which had been enough to cause problems in the family. The Kim family probably wanted him to disappear, but cutting off contact with his siblings had been his own decision. Even after leaving the family, they continued to contact him regularly. If he had made excuses back then, he wouldn't have been able to accept the reality of his magical incapacity. He had a bright future, with a magic contribution score of 10, and then lost everything in an accident. So he drew a line between himself and the world. Physically and mentally, he couldn't even take care of himself, and maybe, deep down, he resented them for it. He wondered if his life would have been different if it weren't for them at the time. He had always regretted the person he was back then. Especially in Yu Zhang's case, if he had stayed by her side, maybe she wouldn't have ended up living with the label of a traitorous villain. During their walk, they talked casually about the arena, and the woman suggested that he buy his equipment at her store. Concerned, she asked if he wasn't in a hurry to buy equipment, and if he was attending a magic class. He replied that he was working as an alchemist. She asked if he planned to use his money to buy alchemy materials, and he said he had been lucky enough to find some. Li Yu said that was great since she also needed materials, which intrigued him. Kim asked what materials she needed since she was in the combat field. His sister explained that in combat zones they made potions to aid in training. He asked why she couldn't just request them from an alchemist or another producer. After all, with her abilities, she could easily collect all types of potions. Grabbing his arm, the woman said she needed to visit their mother soon, and the young man told her to drop it. But before he could say anything else, she quickly pulled him along to take him there. Daeong was intrigued by the scene she witnessed. She asked if that was the same young woman she had met before. She was completely different from usual. Smiling, she wondered if that was her different side. She truly didn't understand. They arrived at a market where many people were selling recovery potions. Feeling uncomfortable, the young man said he was leaving, but his sister insisted that alchemists were always sure on materials and told him to watch a little longer. Shaking his head, he said he already had enough, but the woman insisted that he take one more item. Checking his inventory, he said it was full. Excitedly, she told him not to worry. She had something she wanted to give him. Smiling, he thought that shopping with others was scarier than he had imagined. His sister walked around excitedly, trying to show him different things while he could easily distinguish the colors of the materials. She checked every little detail carefully, but for him, that part wasn't important. As long as the classification matched, he didn't care about the other details. Then she handed him an arena access device. Excitedly, she told him it was a model made by Seongsam and hadn't been released yet. Access devices were launched in the form of helmets, capsules, and protected glasses. Surprisingly, they were the result of direct contact between the arena and governments around the world. At first, only powerful countries like the US and China had access, but she had directly reached out to all nations to stop their exploitation. They even claimed that they had revoked the qualifications of all Chinese and American players. He asked if it was really okay for her to give him that. The girl responded that they were already using it. It just hadn't been marketed yet. Kim said he was an outsider and asked again if it was really okay. His sister said she was offering it to him. She told him that if Seongsam came looking for him, he should just tell her. Even after hearing that, the young man kept analyzing the situation. He asked if it wouldn't be more appropriate to buy it directly from the store. She said it would be bad if he ran around the arena without a device. Seeing her bite her lips, he remembered that she always did that when trying to be stubborn. She told him to think of it as a way to repay him for how rude the agency manager had been to him. He thought it was a good deal since he was already looking for an access device anyway. Currently, he was thinking about starting arena broadcasts, so this would work even better. Stopping in the middle of the path, he said it was time for him to leave. The woman said she was going to visit their mother at the hospital. Thinking about it, he remembered that his aunt's illness was related to the arena and decided to investigate. When the Galactic Arena first opened, just like the mana deficiency he had suffered, there was an arena-related disease that appeared in awakened individuals. He didn't know its exact name, but since she had been chosen by the constellations, she should be able to hold on for a while. She had treated a legitimate child as if it were her own, so he needed to grow stronger quickly and start working on a cure. At that moment, his sister grabbed his arm again. Nervously, she told him he needed to answer them, leaving him confused. A few seconds later, he realized she was talking about the messages. Zhang said that Chuck had been bragging about the fact that Kim had sent him a message. Scratching his head, Kim said there was nothing to brag about. With a sigh, he thought that they weren't kids anymore and that he had let them know when he arrived. Excited, she asked if he promised to send messages from now on. Patting her head, he called her a child. At that gesture, the woman looked confused. At the same moment, he quickly pulled his hand away, nervous because he knew that girls didn't like having their hair touched. Awkwardly, he told her to take care on her way back and thought that they should leave before anything strange happened. Turning his back, he said goodbye. Behind him, Daeong commented that he had been rude and shouldn't have touched her hair. Noticing that Zhang wasn't moving, he wondered if she was angry. Getting closer, she told him not to worry. She would handle it. There were a lot of people around and she didn't want to draw attention since everyone there was a player and it wasn't easy for them to stay quiet. However, as he got closer, he realized that she was blushing, not angry. Embarrassed, the woman muttered that she didn't want anyone to see that. Excited, Daeyoung said it was fine, but she thought she had just witnessed something interesting. Changing the subject, she asked what happened with that matter, leaving her intrigued. She said that since it was just the two of them there, she could speak freely. Daeyoung commented that if it was about the incident from years ago, there was still nothing, not a single clue, as if someone had completely erased everything. She remarked that it was strange because the Korean elite had been the target of that attack, but the media had been unusually silent. The other day, the hair of the ST group made a joke on his broadcast and the media went crazy. Even though he was just the third generation of a wealthy family, it was shocking how much attention that had gotten. Yet now, everything was silent. It seemed that someone powerful was trying to cover things up, and the other woman said that digging deeper could cause problems. Smiling, Jung asked if she was scared. Daeyoung denied it. She said she was just asking if Jung was okay, because she had a lot more to lose than Daeyoung did. Liu said she didn't have much to lose. Then she turned with a smile, watching her brother walk away. Right now, she had found a reason to fight, and that was all she knew. Daeyoung asked if she was really starting this work, because once she did, there was no turning back. Jung told her to go ahead and bring the evidence if she had it, to bring her the head of an awakened one, because she had learned something very interesting. That night, the player arrived home exhausted. Throwing himself onto the bed, he thought that his home was the best place to be. The stone asked him about the girl he had seen earlier. He said they had known each other since they were 5 years old and had grown up together. Concerned, he asked if something was bothering the stone, and it started stuttering. It said the woman seemed complicated, but since they had been friends since childhood, the stone couldn't stop him from being around her. It added that it would be there if he needed anything, then changed the subject, asking if they should start working on the elixir. Stretching, Kim agreed to start. Gathering all the ingredients, among them a rug, he noted that the size was perfect. Looking at the corner of the room, he thought it would be a good place. With just a snap of his fingers, he began creating a desk with multiple drawers. Touching it, he thought that alchemy was incredible and always gave him perfect results. Starts arranging the materials on the table and thinking about where each thing could go. Normally, he would use elixirs to make materials stronger, but grabbing the goblin serum, he says he will try something different. Goblin materials usually had connections with paralysis. They use their own red juice, so they should purify the corrupted magic. He was planning to enhance the paralytic properties and corrupt the elixirs. The stone warns him that corruption magic was demonic and could destroy his body with just a touch. Smiling, the young man says he knows, and she comments that it could lead to penalties as severe as a curse. Caressing his chest, he asks her not to worry because he has a plan. He knows someone who is incredibly skilled at dealing with corruption magic. Then he calls the stone to try a new synthesis. After some time, he asks what she thinks and says it's just a matter of knowledge. She starts to speak, but he tells her to admit that he is intelligent and quick to understand. He asks if it is possible, and the stone says it is, but she is not sure if it will work as he says. The young man becomes enthusiastic, and she tells him that she is not an artifact that uses abilities. Since he has a book of knowledge, it wouldn't be necessary to use so much Astrape. The stone tells him that he would need to use many conquest points later unless he increased his alchemy attribute. He was about to create something as valuable as mythical grade artifacts, and the skill required to use alchemy was beyond comprehension. Even by maximizing his stats as a classifier, it would not make it viable. Mythical grade items were only given by the constellations to their chosen ones under certain conditions. Kim asks how many conquest points it would cost, and the stone begins to calculate. She says it depends on the completion rate he is aiming for, and that they were lucky with the obsidian tablet. Being an alchemist gave him a bonus, and she had a certain charm. He asks if the charm was the special properties of the Philosopher's stone. They start discussing the stone's charm, and the young man asks if the completion rate is that important. She says yes, which makes him thoughtful. The stone defines a completion rate in percentage terms, and reducing the rate lowers the cost. That worked for Astrape-equipped items, but knowledge was different. No matter how great the information was, if it was incomplete, it was useless. He would have to balance cost and usability. She decides to ask him something about the obsidian tablet. She says that no matter how good it was just a crafting item, which meant it could also absorb knowledge. With that information, he decides to start immediately, and the stone comments that he understands how synthesis structures work. His rate was exactly 10%, which for a player was enough. They talk about crafting items because the young man only knew a little from hearing stories. Reading the book, the girl asks the young man if he understands anything in that mess. She says that technique only works for the 10 levels of mastery in the celestial demon art, but her brain can't take any more. Since he was great at analyzing things, she asks if he can help figure out the sequence. In his past lives, someone asked him to decipher the celestial demon art. The text was only accessible to its hair, so he couldn't read it, but he knew it was divided into 10 levels. Logically, each level corresponded to 10% completion and would contain the instructions for the first level. That was the art that made someone high level with only 7 levels, so he planned to read and decipher it on his own. But if a philosopher's stone could absorb knowledge, everything would change. He wouldn't need to decipher it manually, only prepare his body, because human transmutation would take care of the rest. When he asks how much 10% completion would cost, the stone replies that it would be 5,000 conquest points. He is impressed by how cheap it is, and she says that later levels would cost a fortune because it was mythical grade knowledge. She says they could learn the first star and that it should be enough, then asks him to start immediately. The system announces that the stone has requested 5,000 points, and he accepts with determination. He begins to form the celestial demon art, merging skill with magic. Finally, he completes the replica he wanted. With speed and excitement, He asks the stone to absorb it immediately. While absorbing, Kim notices that the constellations are not reacting this time. Even after absorption, the stone says it feels like trying to grab smoke with his hands. At that moment, he starts feeling something strange, and looking at his hands, he sees everything blurry as if he were regressing. Kim ends up fainting and wakes up in an open environment. Beside him, there was a huge waterfall and trees all around. Surprised, he asks himself where he was. Behind him, someone starts talking to him. An old man sitting down asks how his body is. Standing up, he says he is fine, and the old man comments that it is not bad for a young man in these times. Extending his hand, he invites him to sit. Seeing this, the player is surprised. However, he is unable to walk as his body is instantly pulled toward him. Kneeling on the ground, he looks back and wonders how he got there so fast. He says he has never seen a constellation face to face. Laughing, the old man comments that he speaks as if he knows him. Kim says that the technique he mastered before coming here was the celestial demon art, so it was impossible not to know him. He says he couldn't have asked a more obvious question and introduces himself as the celestial demon Constellation. The system congratulates him and his 5,000 points are recovered. That Constellation was an entity, extremely dangerous. They would do anything to help him and warn him not to provoke it recklessly. If a critical situation occurred, he would be sent back to Earth, and he thinks about the system's warnings. The entity says that is just an excess of caution. Watching him speak, the young man thinks he looks like a professor or a student. He decides to ask if he is here because of his celestial demon art. The old man says young people are bold for getting straight to the point. He says his interest lies elsewhere, not in his technique. Then he asks who exactly he is. He asks what he means, and the entity comments that it is exactly what he heard. He thinks the old man is trying to determine how rare he is. Even Zeus and the black goat did not seem to notice his regression. But now, high-ranking Constellation like the celestial demon was asking him about it. Smiling, he asks if he is trying to play dumb and says he is not that ignorant. Right after, he asks how much he knows about him. Remembering everything the girl had said, he states that he knows the man seeks domination. He valued the survival of the fittest, similar to how things worked in the demon realm. Laughing, he says the young man is smart and concludes that he is correct. As he said, he always sought strength and walked the path of domination even before becoming a constellation. Kim notices his eyes change color. They remind him of the gaze he saw in his past life. That gaze should belong to a constellation in the same position as the celestial demon. The man shows satisfaction, but his eyes emit a different energy. The waterfall continues to flow and he feels as if he is sinking into emptiness. But strangely, he's not afraid. It feels oddly familiar. He says the young man carries the mark of his presence. Interesting, a mere mortal looking into the void without hesitation. He asks if he is still going to play dumb. Kim thinks this has to do with the title he obtained. When the old man looks intrigued, he reveals that his title is the one who receives the gaze from beyond. Upon hearing this, the entity bursts into laughter. He says Kim describes himself in very high terms. Kim asks if he already knew about it before. With a smile, he says he did. Without a reaction, he asks if the old man had lost it. The entity asks if the player is not an assassin. Then he asks if he ever stays quiet. Observing more closely, Simon says his intent is intense, but there is no need to be afraid. If anything happened, the black goat would not remain silent. Laughing, the old man says it is no wonder they have taken an interest in him, and it makes sense why he is being watched. He says he lost to that person and could add that it is why he is curious. He asks what part caught his attention and tells him to be honest. To his surprise, the entity says it took 1,000 years just to attract their gaze. Seeing his shock, he comments that he forgot a mere mortal wouldn't understand. He starts to explain but gets irritated by how much noise the system makes. Reading what the system wants, he says they will have to interrupt their conversation, calling him Young One. When the young man questions him, the Constellation says that he is now his disciple. He has no problem with him mastering the celestial demon art. Turning around, he welcomes him and says it is an honor to see someone continuing his legacy. Since he is not an official disciple, he has a request to make. The system starts displaying a question, leaving him intrigued. Seeing his expression, the entity says he even formatted a proposal in their style for him. It is to find someone worthy of the sponsorship of a constellation, and he wonders how that would change his future. It is someone under his gaze, and he trusts him to make the judgment. However, there are conditions. First of all, it had to be a woman. He starts to say that she should be beautiful and daring when he's interrupted. Sometime later, Simon wakes up in his room startled. The stone asks him what happened and why he suddenly fainted. Hearing this, he starts to wonder if he really fainted. He tells her that he met a constellation, making her curious. Shocked, she asks if he met a demon. When he asks how she knew, she says that Constellation had a tiny brain. Besides being obsessed with bright colors and having a phrase that gender didn't matter, as long as someone had good taste, that was what was important. She asks if the young man was attacked, and he says nothing happened. She says he was lucky to be handsome, or else the demon would have killed him, and that since he let him go unharmed, it must mean he liked him. They continue talking, and the young man says the old man thanked him for learning. The stone says he was crazy, just as the rumors said, and changes the subject, asking to finish the elixir. Getting up from the ground, the player agrees. She asks if she needs to subtly tell him the recipes. Already preparing the elixir, he says there's no need, and the stone tells him that every time he stirs the potion, the serum screams, as if asking what he was doing to it. The more he mixes the potions, the more the stone comments about it, watching closely. Sometime later, it is ready, but is a pill, not a potion. Since he didn't have a container, he couldn't make it in liquid form. Picking it up, he asks to check its status. The name is Bloodflower Pill, grade C, with a high chance of gaining demonic energy. Looking at it, he says, is very well made. He is nervous since it has been a while since he made an elixir, but he couldn't believe he was able to extract options for permanent attribute increases to strength. It's grade C due to the poor ingredients, but the options were insane. However, there was a chance of not receiving the demonic energy, but that was true only for normal people. The first star technique of the celestial demon divine art was already fully present, so he only needed to use it correctly after consumption. After all this, he decides to take it. A massive energy surges through his body, and he decides to meditate. The system starts showing him the elixir's effects. When he opens his eyes again, he is no longer in his room, but in an empty space. Looking at a face that smiles at him, he says he has found it. However, it starts to disappear. Running, he tells the stone that he cannot let that happen. She is faster and catches it before it escapes. Panting, exhausted, he praises her as they had almost let it slip away. First, they needed to create the Danshan, and then the Great Celestial Circle. Holding the fugitive, he asks if he really had to create the Danshan. He asks what she means, and the stone asks if they even needed a Danshan. Thinking about it, Kim says he never considered that. The Danshan was a condensed form to store and use Kai efficiently. The stone asks why he was worried since he already had the best condensed form in the world. From mythical weapon synthesis to knowledge absorption, the philosopher's stone was worthy of being called the ultimate condensed form. Smiling at her, he says she is right and there's no reason not to use her as his Danshan. Indeed, it was much better than the traditional one. She says that even though he has learned the celestial demon divine technique, he is still an alchemist and shouldn't forget his roots. Steinman comments that alchemy changed his life, so he thanks her deeply for helping him realize that. Closing his eyes, the system emits a signal saying that the absorption of demonic energy was a success. But now the demonic energy was attributed to synthesis power, leaving him confused. Looking at his status, he thinks that this is what an attributed stat looks like. Looking more closely, he realizes that his stat is at 8. That affected his status and not just the display location in his window. His current synthesis power was 17, so for demonic energy to be 8, it was almost half of his synthesis power. Thinking about this, he decides to clarify a doubt with a stone. He asks if this means that his demonic energy increases with his synthesis power. She says it is similar to how it is influenced by his growth. After all, it is an attributed relationship. It wasn't perfect because rounding didn't apply, stats had to be even numbers. By simply increasing synthesis power, the demonic energy was copied. This makes the stone very excited for the next arena, and the young man enthusiastic. In the galactic arena, there were 100 participants, and it would start when all participants were visible. Seeing that it was a survival match, one of the players comments on how annoying it is. But he should be careful with his words, as survival was a common event even in higher ranks. Looking at the men in front of him, he calls them clients. He says that survival was the worst event for a bus service operation, and his party had already dissolved. They grow nervous, observing their surroundings, and one of them gets irritated for having paid 10 million for this. The man tells everyone to calm down and not pay attention to the chat. The rewards for survival were divided by ranking among 100 participants, and he says he will take them to first place. Smiling, he says their understanding is on another level, and they are right. The journey was expensive, but it would be worth every penny. They praise his skills, and the man becomes embarrassed by their open compliments. Then one of them asks how he will get them to first place, and another suggests forming a team. The two are shocked because it could be a problem for his reputation, but he tells them not to worry about that and that the map looked like an abandoned mine. If they hid, it would be difficult for others to notice their formation. It was a great idea because players at that ranking wouldn't have presence detection either. The man says he will eliminate everyone until only the 4 of them remain, killing them cleanly. Then the 3 would have to decide their ranking among themselves since they had paid the same amount, and he couldn't interfere. However, while they were talking, a portal suddenly begins to open where they stand. A hooded man appears. Seeing him, the leader says this will be his first easy kill. He tells the others to hide in the back. Kim and the man stare at each other, smiling. The arena begins, and the system instructs them to eliminate their enemies. It issues a warning that due to Simmons' achievements, his placement ranking period will end. They were closing his placement period with just this match, and he wonders if they wanted him to grow faster. Even before his regression, he had been stuck at level 1 and powerless. This time, if he was good enough, he wanted to climb, now that his magical inability had recovered and he had gained powerful abilities. This was a huge opportunity for him. Reading the panel, Ken realizes he forgot to turn on the broadcast. He believes he probably has no spectators at the moment anyway. At that moment, the Constellations request to participate in the broadcast as well, so he decides to start. The man rushes at him to throw a punch, using his ability that causes a loud impact when it lands. His fists had almost reached diamond level, so there was no way to resist them. That was why he loved hitting the weak. But to his surprise, his opponent took no damage. He had stopped his punch with just one hand. With the other, Kim punches his stomach with force. His blow was so strong that the ground beneath the leader cracked as he slid back, irritated, calling him trash. People began sending messages asking what had just happened. Ironically, Kim says that the man seems quite skilled. Shocked, the player wonders if the man dodged his punch at the last second. Judging by his equipment, he looks like a fighter and is definitely not ordinary. His stone warns him that more people are appearing, and with that, he begins to understand the situation. Kim asks the man if he is a booster. Smiling, the man asks how he knew that, and Kim says he could tell just by looking. The group leader asks why he is speaking so bluntly, and Kim says he doesn't have to respect someone who carries others for money. He says that those who rank up without using their own skills and those who accept money to boost others are the same. Looking at him intensely, he adds that, to be more precise, boosters are even more problematic. Because of vermin like them, players in the arena suffer. He says the inhabitants of the Abyss were different because they had that attitude even knowing who he was. Seeing Kim's references and intelligence, the man laughs and wonders if he really intends to climb up. What the man wanted was to make him angry, so he starts to provoke him. Shaking the opponent's mental state was also a skill, and he thinks a rookie like Kim wouldn't understand that. He wonders if the other will dare to counter his surprise attack, and he swears to pay him back for that humiliation. Simon says it's obvious that he is using provocation in a lower-ranked match, and that's pathetic. But the man counters that it seems to be working. He asks again if Kim is angry, and with a smile, Kim says he is not. However, one of the spectators just gave him a mission, so it was hard to give up now. Laughing, the man says he underestimated him for receiving missions and starts mocking his rank. Unbothered, Kim says that they receive missions during the placement period. Using his ability, he says it should be incredible and launches an attack, leaving the other pleased, thinking his plan had worked. He clenches his fists with aura, believing he would be attacked immediately. The two confront each other and stand face to face. The fight continues with several attacks using aura and their abilities, dodging each other's moves. In the middle of the fight, Kim manages to land a punch on the leader's stomach. He spits out strawberry juice from his mouth in shock. Simon dodged all the aura attacks and found an opening, making the other wonder who he was, as he was not normal. His comrades become worried, and noticing he was being observed, he thinks he needs to put an end to it. The leader decides to face him with all of his power and uses his ability to run as fast and as powerfully as he can. But to his disappointment, Kim skillfully dodges his attacks. Smiling, the player asks if that was all he had. Then he says it's his turn and uses his ability to feint a punch. The punch was so powerful that his opponent was instantly sent flying. He and the fragments of stone that went with him crashed into the wall. He couldn't believe he was being defeated and wondered where the other got his strength from. The other players approach, asking if he was okay. Seeing their faces, he feels embarrassed about what happened. Calling him a bastard, he charges at his opponent. He yells for him to stop running and face him. Simon begins to invoke the celestial demon's divine technique. A great explosion of light occurs, lifting dust and stones around them. Seeing his power, the man becomes even more enraged. Kneeling on the ground, he calls him a bastard while exuding a murderous aura. In a fighting stance, he thinks that this was a top-tier category opponent. Furious, his opponent shouts for him to die. Kim thinks that normally he would dodge, as it would be the right choice. But he couldn't afford to fail this mission, so he decides to use the Ogre's fabric ability. A celestial demon's divine technique unleashes an imperial destruction. Once again, they both charge toward each other, and a clash causes an explosion of energy. The man spits red juice again, leaving the spectators in disbelief. He kneels, missing one of his arms, unable to believe what happened. With his head down, he admits defeat. Immediately after, he collapses, and the system announces that the winner has claimed his first blood. The reward for that arena increased, and Kim begins interacting with the screen. He thinks it was still difficult to execute the technique completely. As a reward, the demon Constellation granted him 500 points, making him happy since he rarely earned that much from missions. He had worked hard to fulfill the mission given by the celestial demon, and the system stated that it was pleased. He received praise from the Galactic Arena for earning sponsorship from 3 high-ranking constellations, and to his astonishment, he gained 1,000 conquest points. He also acquired the title of the King's Choice due to an achievement and wondered what it could have been. The title was renewable and attracted the attention of high-level constellations, meaning that his interest grew, so would his future. Kim was astonished because all of his abilities would increase by 1 each time he received sponsorship. However, there were complications, such as the fact that if the constellations withdrew, the additional options would decrease. Unlike growth-type titles, there was a possibility of losing options. Looking at his status window, he sees that all of his abilities have improved. His demonic energy remained unaffected, but he decides to think positively since his other stats had increased. He didn't know what the constellation's future demands would be, but he should accept as many missions as possible from now on. At that moment, a boy who witnessed everything couldn't believe that Donking had lost. Noticing their lost expressions, Kim becomes intrigued. Looking at them, he remembers that they were also there. Without much thought, he heads toward the group of boys. They become afraid and point their weapons to threaten the player. Simon wonders how they passed the tutorial with so few skills, and the stone calls them pathetic. Because of people who paid for trips without any real abilities, decent players died in the arena. Clenching his fists, he uses his ability and approaches. With speed, he strikes the boys simultaneously. The 3 fall quickly and are defeated within minutes. Behind him, a man says that he is extremely strong, that his innate technique seems superior, and that he liked how the young man didn't go easy on the weak. Kim comments that he was misunderstanding, that this was the arena, and one shouldn't go easy on the weak. Smiling, the man says that's exactly why he liked him even more, and comments that many had superior specs but didn't know how to use them. Observing his words, the player wonders who this person was. This one comments that the world did not function solely on strength. Right after, he reaches into his pocket and hands him a card. Seeing it, Simon becomes intrigued. It was a business card from the continental province. He asks if the young man was a scout in China. The offer was meant for Donking because he was too valuable to be just a booster. He would do it if he started streaming again. Reading the card, Kim never thought he would see the continental province there. It was one of the top guilds in the world, rising to the top 2 when Zhang Huan became its master, and the stone warns that he should not get involved. He thought they might start making moves soon, but it seemed they had been hunting for talent for some time. The man says he understands his suspicion because he is aware of China's image in Korea. The player accuses him of naturalizing just to participate in the Korean arena, but the man laughs and says matchmaking was only possible at the platinum rank. Reading the comments, he is shocked to see that the names of constellations were among them. He says this was too much because using the names of constellations crossed the line. The constellations continue commenting, and the man thinks they were just trying to gain views. With Spee, he attacks them in the comments. After that, the Black Goat constellation asks what was happening. Smiling, he tells Kim that he would pay the 920 million exchange fee in advance, that it was merely a symbol of sincerity, and that weapons and items above 500,000 would be provided. The contract terms were renewable every 3 years, and even if the contract ended, the supplied items would remain his. He finishes by saying that if he naturalized as Chinese, they would provide over 50 million yuan, which was 10 times the additional payment. He says they couldn't refuse because even Sensen didn't offer such conditions for low-ranking players. After hearing everything, Kim says it was an incredible offer, but the mission he received was still incomplete. Reading it again, he notices that it was an ambiguous mission and did not specifically state to reach first place or achieve a certain number of kills. It mentioned flawless path, but in the end, it was asking to demonstrate capability. Seven thinks that subjective questions were generally harder than objective ones. He believes it will be completed when the arena ends. However, something behind him catches his attention. Looking at the man, he punches him hard in the stomach. Surprised and in pain, he spits out strawberry juice from the impact. Kneeling on the ground with his hand on his stomach, he wonders why he was rejecting the offer. Repeating the question and preparing his ability, Kim simply says it was nothing. He charges at him, saying he just didn't like the terms. Looking at the man on the ground, he knew very well what kind of person he was from his experiences before regression. He wouldn't be deceived again. Stretching his body, he says it was time to enter. The fighter in search of the diamond. He had lost to an unknown player using only fists. People start commenting about the player and where he came from. Donking was still streaming because the team needed to maintain precision. He tells people to calm down because the arena had ended and the boost broadcasts were composed of highly loyal spectators. He wasn't sure what had happened, but he was certain that the other guy was not from that rank bracket, and the chat agrees. They ask if there were hackers in the arena. The priority was to apologize to the customers. Normally, they didn't allow 100% refunds, but this was unexpected. Donking says the refund would be total, and people in the comments love it. Taking off his glasses, he says it was time to go and thanks everyone for watching. Shortly after, he ends the broadcast. The glasses are thrown forcefully to the ground, and he wonders how this was possible. To use Kai, one would need attributes of at least level 100 or be a prodigy like Kim Hyuk or Jung with innate talent. But a bronze or silver player shouldn't have appeared in that category, and he thinks he has never seen someone like that. Since reaching platinum, he had suffered all kinds of penalties just to face this humiliation, and there must have been some artifact or trick he didn't know about. While pondering, he remembers something. Kim had said he received a mission. Grabbing his phone, he starts searching for a broadcast. He wanted to know what kind of man he was. When he sees that the guy had no ranking, he is shocked. He was a novice who hadn't even finished his placement matches. With determination, he clicks to watch the broadcast he found. From inside a cave, someone was calling for help. Trembling, the man begins to question who this person was but doesn't finish his train of thought. All that could be seen on the screen after that was pure, well-blended strawberry juice. Shocked, he thinks it was impossible. That Kim's levels of martial arts were insane. Each attack contained both offensive and defensive movements with a high level of martial principle. Astonished, he wonders where he had learned it. Why was he so good at finding enemies in dark places? The map of the abandoned mine had a maze-like structure with occasional areas of complete darkness where there were no torches, yet he kept moving even in the dark zones. He wonders if that could really be from an unranked player. Looking at his phone again, he wonders why the 3 spectators watching weren't talking. When he types to ask if anyone is there, someone else responds. Curious, he wonders who that person was. The person says they didn't need a refund and that they had sent him a private message. Excited, he says that as expected of Round, he would definitely be verified. Relieved, he sits back saying he dodged a bullet in time. But at that moment, a message on his phone catches his attention. Reading it, he sees the names of the constellations. He calls them crazy and wonders how they could use the names of the constellations. He says they went too far and crossed the line, but all they do is send a question mark character in the chat. Smiling, he asks if they were just trying to gain views. He threatens them, and the Black Goat asks what was happening. He gets even more irritated because they were swearing and using the names of constellations. In the game, Simon defeats another player. He wonders if that would be the end. He was in first place in the arena with 20 kills. He knew that with that score, he would stay in first place if he remained calm. However, the mission he received at the beginning was still incomplete, and he wonders what was missing. Reading it again, he notices that it was an ambiguous mission and did not specify reaching first place or achieving a certain number of kills. It mentioned flawless path, but in the end, it was asking to demonstrate capability. Simon thinks that subjective questions were generally harder than objective ones. He believes it will be completed when the arena ends. However, something behind him catches his attention. The system states that the Light Owl's body fabric was at 13%. Above him, several crystals were glowing. He needed to get closer and take a look, so he used the Black Panther's fabric. Picking one up in his hand, he wonders if it was silver ore. The Philosopher's Stone asks him if that was the thing. Kim is confused, but it insists that he knew what it was. Trying to guess, he opens his status window. The stone asks if he was correct. Excited, he says yes. Cheerfully, it tells the young man to run and grab the crystal. Picking it up, he thinks he never imagined they would find that in an abandoned mine. First, he needed to finish the arena, and then he would verify it properly. But in front of him, a system message appears. He realizes he left his broadcast on and had accidentally granted manager privileges to 3 constellations earlier. Reading the notifications, he is shocked to see that people were arguing with the constellations. The goat started banning everyone in the chat, and Zeus praised it for doing so, leaving the young man wondering what was happening. He hadn't expected the situation to escalate like this. He only gave them permission to maintain the King's Choice title. But it turned into a keyboard war. Seeing what had become of it, Kim sighs. They had banned 1,000 people, and even more were joining because of the drama. So he decides to deal with the constellations first. The person who started it was the guy he defeated, and then Yvyam agreed with him. He was trying to ignore it, but donking spectators arrived and the level of criticism increased. Looking at what they were doing, he sighs again, saying he couldn't let this continue. If a constellation intervened before the regular arena started, the galactic arena would not remain at the top ranking, but he couldn't ignore it. It could lead to a drop in statistics, and there were only 4 attributes for strength, agility, constitution, and synthesis power. So he wonders what his approach should be. He asks the black goat to stop and says he will reopen the chat with manager permissions, telling it not to pay attention to the comments. The goat says it didn't care about humans, and Kim thanks it for worrying about him. The constellation becomes embarrassed and accepts the young man's terms. The other 2 laugh, and the player feels relieved that they got past it. Walking, he says he would prefer that his existence remain hidden for now. Even national power was evaluated based on a single player chosen by a constellation, and it was too soon to fight against those who had not yet received a ranking. Typically, there was a mindset to destroy what could not be obtained. It was human nature after all. Kent was thinking along the same lines. That's why the matter of the constellations had to remain a secret. Then he decides to ask them a question to see if they agree with his opinion. With everything resolved, he decides to turn the broadcast back on. The chat was talking when they noticed that the stream had returned. He tells the viewers that there was a small misunderstanding, that the managers were trying to prepare something for his old self but got caught up, and he apologizes. Reading the new comments, he is happy that the atmosphere has improved. Among them, he receives his first donation and a message encouraging him to continue streaming. To his surprise, he also earns an additional 100 conquest points. Excited, he thanks the donor. Although Constellation sponsorships would be significant in the long run, donations and viewer interest were crucial. The system informs him that he has reached the goal of 5,000 viewers. Along with it, he gains 500 points, and if the stream continued to grow, he could earn conquest points regularly. He tells the audience that they will start again and to be respectful because he had disabled the chat. That afternoon, Simon arrives at his apartment. He thinks that having an access device was definitely more convenient. He had completed the Celestial Demon's Constellation mission, and among them, several other achievements started appearing. The rewards were incredible, and he leveled up 5 times just from the leveling test. The Philosopher's Stone increased by 3 levels. That was like gaining 8 levels of experience. At that moment, people started talking again about the arena and the mine. Thinking about it, he realizes he doesn't have a proper waiting screen for his broadcast. He says that since he recently started streaming, he would prepare a waiting screen soon. People start giving him ideas and he feels embarrassed, but thanks everyone for their support. It was unbelievable to think that this day had come for someone who was magically inept and expected to live as a level 1 forever. With a smile on his face, he thanks everyone for watching his inadequate stream. He decides to end it there and says they will see each other in the next broadcast. Everyone says goodbye and the stream ends. Sitting on the floor, he says that it was addictive and the stone warns him not to get addicted. Stroking it, he tells it not to worry, but it insists that it was serious. Opening the screen, he decides to check something. Looking at all the notifications, he realizes that he wasn't directly placed in Platinum rank. Even though he recorded incredible results in each match, there were only 3 games, and considering the Platinum ranking standard, he shouldn't be placed there. Looking at the screen, he notices that the adjustment was taking too long. When it completes, selection screens appear with options to choose from. But option 1 was better, so he decides to click on it. Except something catches his attention. In option 1, he would gain an additional 10% experience and rewards, but he is intrigued that there's a follow-up option. It was a choice that was actually a penalty for anyone who looked at it. The arena must have had some kind of intention. His stone asks why he is hesitating and says he needs to check it quickly. He starts wondering if the system had a reason to force him into the silver rank. He takes out the mithril ore, which was S rank. Even though it was light, it surpassed steel. Kim asks the stone to evaluate it, and it asks if it was necessary since all the information was already on the screen. He says there was something he wanted to check. The stone agrees but says they would need to use some synthesis power. Reading the information, he discovers that the ore was an entry item just as he suspected. He never imagined it would be an entry item for a special arena. Just mithril alone would be incredible. But if it was an entry item, it was even better. It was an item that allowed entry into a special arena outside the matches defined by the Galactic Arena. He discovers that this was why option 2 was created. Beyond that, the ore was grade X, and he didn't know that it appeared yet. The world recognized SSS as the highest grade, but based on his past life, X would start appearing in about 2 to 3 years. The difference between the grades was that an X rating was a unique ranking, proof that there was only one of that item. The fact that it was attached to an entry item meant that the difficulty of the special arena would be considerable. A condition that made entry impossible, considering that the system placed option 2 in the silver classification. That item would become unusable once he surpassed the silver rank, so the best option would be to enter after maximizing his specs. To get a good response from the broadcast, he needed something stimulating. Then the system informs him that the action was complete. Kim decides to choose option 2, and the system tells him that his experience and rewards will be reduced by 30%. He was assigned to the silver ranking. Due to the measurement, that penalty would only apply to the silver classification, right after he gained 500 conquest points. Two commentators excitedly discuss a certain person. They were from a famous TV program in Korea. They begin to enthusiastically praise this person and talk about his ranking. Known as Guka, he took first place in all regions, turning it into a national sensation. The broadcast where Kim Si-hyuk defeated the raid boss alone surpassed 500 million views. They speak in amazement, noting that it had only been a short time since the broadcast, and they praise the young man even more. One of them says he watched the video, and the other comments that he was jealous. The man watching tells Si-hyuk that they were talking about him. With a smile, the player listens to everything. Falling onto the sofa, he tells him not to disturb his break, and the man curses at him, asking why he was in his office. Si-hyuk says he is a client, and the other mocks him, saying he learned to throw his weight around. Then, cursing again, he asks if being a client allowed him to do whatever he wanted. The young man says he just wanted to rest. The man gives up and comments that the player had a really messy life. Shortly after, he fills a cup with coffee. Surprising him, he hands the cup over more calmly. Kim gets angry because he was about to sleep, and as he takes the cup, the man tells him to drink the coffee and leave. They continue arguing about the young man wanting to sleep, and the man gets irritated by it. Smoking a cigarette, he finally says he gives up. Then he throws an envelope onto the table, surprising the young man. Si-hyuk asks what it is, and the man simply responds that it was something he requested earlier. Reading the papers, he asks if he had really researched that. Carefree, the man says that even though he was treated like a dog, he was a big boss in that area. Laughing, the young man asks why he talked that way and when he had ever treated him like that, and angrily, the man tells him to make a request instead of an order. He says that the rich were always the worst, and the young man comments that he shouldn't feel bad since he paid for everything with AP on the last request. Flicking the ashes from his cigarette, he wonders if the player was completely oblivious. He comments that what he wanted was money, and if he still wanted AP, he would still be in the arena instead. Kim says his offer still stood, but the man tells him to stop because aligning with him would only ruin his image. The young man remains silent for a while. With a strange aura, he comments that he could get rid of anyone who said anything. That statement puts the man on alert, but soon after, he smiles. He asks if he wanted to wipe out the entire Korean association and says that despite his appearance, his personality was distorted. Then he realizes that he might actually be serious, and the young man asks why he was so surprised. He says he was just trying to reclaim what was originally his. Swallowing dryly, he wonders if the young man really intended to take over the association. Park Jin-wook knew, when Si-hyuk wore that seemingly natural smile. Looking at him, he asks if that was all he managed to find out. Wook says yes and asks if there was a problem. He was dangerous. Just his aura was enough to make his hands sweat, and he was a diamond rank. If he were an ordinary person, he would be trembling. Satisfied, the young man says he had caught a big and unexpected fish. He discovers that Seongsu was after someone, but it was difficult to find out more because they were very cautious. The young man calls him incompetent, but he defends himself, saying he couldn't find out any more details. Sighing, he asks if Jung would know anything about Seongsu. Quickly, the young man says she didn't know anything. She didn't know before and she would know now. He says he thought the girl was investigating something. Simply, the young man says that meant she wasn't involved in the incident. The commentators begin talking about the incident with the 3 constellations. Scratching his head, the man asks since when they didn't get along, and the other replies that they had always been like that. But something at the door catches his attention. A strange dark aura passes through it. Wook asks if there was a meeting scheduled, and Si-hyuk responds that he always schedules them on the days Wook is absent. Still looking at the door, Kim comments that the night hunter was being pursued. The aura at the door grows even stronger. When it opens, a young man enters, calling for Wook. Wook tells him the place is closed and to come back another day. Looking to the side, he notices that Hyuk had left too quickly. He thinks that his hiding ability had improved, and even an assassin like him was impressed. The young man comments that he didn't know it was his day off. Behind the door, the player wonders if he was there on Sang's orders or if he was an assassin sent to kill him. Smiling, he apologizes and says to leave just one request. It was a simple job, but Wook refuses and sends him away. With an even stronger aura, the young man says to just find one person. Noticing that, the man screams and puts his hand under the table. Holding a sword, he thought he had no choice but to use it. At the same moment, Hyuk and he move to attack at the same time. Each one advances from a different side to catch him from the front and the back. However, when the two get closer, they realize who the young man was. Closing the door, Kim calls him brother. Turning to him startled, he asks why he was there. Wook is confused about what was happening. Sometime later, the 3 of them were drinking tea together. The man asks what he wanted to request, and the young man says he was looking for someone. He says he was in the right place, and they were quite confident, leaving him satisfied. Finding a person was not a great challenge for a Night Hunter. The SS rank Night Blessing ability was optimized for assassins. Like other assassination techniques, it was also useful for espionage and information gathering. That's why he sought out Wook, who wonders why he was there. The brother was quiet and uncomfortable. He wonders why the other wouldn't look at him if he was feeling guilty about the incident 10 years ago. Simon asks his brother what he was doing and tells him to lift his head, then asks about the man. Faced with her, the young man becomes visibly nervous. Wook responds and says that Hyuk was not only a junior at the academy, but also one of his main clients. Kim finds it strange because they were not associated, as far as he remembered. He comments that he didn't know they were junior and senior, then remarks that they must be close. At the same time, they both respond that they were mortal enemies, leaving him confused. The man says he was forced to serve him as a slave. Hyuk gets nervous, and his brother comments that it must have been difficult. He mentions that the other was intimidating. The two begin to laugh about his behavior, making him uncomfortable. Laughing, Wook says he found the client he liked. He asks who he was looking for, and the young man says the person was in the country. He says his fee was higher for people in the country and asks for some characteristic of the person. Smiling, he says her name was Mal Suk. She lived in Busan, and she was 24 years old. He says that was the same age as the young man beside him. Wook asks if he knew that woman, and Kim says not in particular. He might have known her before the regression, but not now. The man asks if her address would be enough, and the young man asks if he could find her. Laughing, he says that if he couldn't find someone with so much information, he should quit the business. Hyuk catches his attention regarding what he had given him and says he really should quit the business. He asks for just a few days to find her, and the other asks about the payment. Wook starts saying that he had a lot of information, so it wouldn't be difficult, and besides, he liked him, so he would do it for free. Kim says he couldn't accept because he was diamond level and couldn't use so many abilities for free. Laughing, the man says he was very different from his brother, who always wanted things for free. Then he says he would charge his brother and ask the other what he thought about it, but he just turns his face away indifferent. Simon comments that he couldn't let the other pay for his request, and he responds that he had money and could. Kim wasn't okay with that, and it wasn't about money. It was about relationships. Wook says he wasn't a one-time client, and the other comments that he would like to have a long-term relationship with a night hunter. The man asks if he was refusing free service because of that. Then he says that made him think they were really connected. So the young man asks if they could cover the fee with a different condition, making the other interested. He comments that he knew the other had been buying high-quality materials recently, and asks how he would pay. Simon asks him not to misunderstand because he didn't mean anything bad. He simply thought he could help him. The hunter is confused, and the young man begins to explain. Despite his diamond-level abilities, Park suddenly retired from the arena and now runs a business that only pays in cash. It was like a kind of detective agency. If he remembers his past life, the reason he suddenly retired at the time was because of mana sclerosis. This is a type of arena disease where mana gradually hardens or solidifies. There was no cure at that time, but the recipe for the cure involved fairly common ingredients. Kim had researched all kinds of treatments when he suffered from magical incapacity, so he knew the recipe well. On the day, Hyuk died at the hands of Light Shu. It was Wook who stayed by his side until the end. Still, if the hunter quickly approaches his brother, he could restrict some of Korea's internal problems, including those in the continental province. When he is surprised by the ingredients, his client learns about his illness and questions him about it in surprise. Park asks how the black market leaks someone's transaction details, and the player says that place only cares about money. Suspicious, he asks if he could really help with mana sclerosis. Simon says that if he is given the ingredients, he can make the cure. The two are astonished by the information and wonder if it is possible. Shocked, Park Jin-wook says he doesn't believe that Kim Simon can create the cure. After all, not even diamond-ranked alchemists have achieved such a feat. Smiling, the young man says he will not go into further details. All he needs to know is that, yes, it is possible, and then he can refuse his offer if he doesn't feel comfortable enough. Intrigued, the man reveals that there is something he really wants to know. He then questions why the young man is offering something like that when he had already said he would do the job for free. In response to the question, the protagonist states that he liked his frankness. Jin-wook, staring at the young man intently, starts to get nervous because he can't read his thoughts. Taking action, Kim Simon stands up and extends his hand, asking if he agrees to seal a deal. Having no other option, the night hunter accepts since all he wants is to be cured. The two shake hands, and it is agreed that the young man with the illness will buy the necessary ingredients to make the cure. Jokingly, the dark-haired young man tells him not to worry because he won't steal the materials that will be provided. Leaving the building, Kim Siak says he doesn't understand why his brother is suddenly looking for someone. He gets a flick on the head for saying that and for asking if the young man is also investigating what happened 10 years ago. Walking ahead, the protagonist states that he already said what happened was an accident. After all, the suspects were known awakened criminals, and he was the one who ended up being bitten by some lunatics. But since everything is now in the past, he and Yoo-jong can stop thinking about it. From now on, they should only look toward the future without carrying any guilt or resentment. Impressed, his brother reveals that he never thought he would hear him say something like that. In response, the young man says he is also surprised. Thinking to himself, he says that his incredible younger brother deserves and needs to move forward, especially because now he is the one who will become Earth's hope. Continuing the conversation, Kim Simon says he has high expectations for Kim Si-yuk as national power is divided according to rank. He then reveals his fear of losing his affiliation displayed in the status window. Intrigued, his brother says that is the most useless item in the status window and asks what its purpose is. In his thoughts, the young man says he will understand how important the item is when he loses his affiliation and starts living as a refugee, receiving frequent penalties in the achievement store, which will ultimately lead to the most fatal consequence for a player: growth stagnation. Not wanting to tell the truth, he chooses to say that he only has some information about affiliation. Smiling, the younger brother says it seems like his brother has a good source of information, especially considering his recent transactions. He then asks why he has only some information if his source is that good. Opening his inventory, the protagonist says he wasn't going to tell his brother that, but he decided to be generous at least once. He takes out a mithril ore, leaving Kim Si-yuk confused since he doesn't even know what the stone is. His older brother tells him to shut up and look at the information on the screen, leaving him astonished. After all, he never received such a valuable entry-level item. Kim Simon then reveals that thanks to the ore, he managed to recover from his mana incapacitation and even completed his classifications. The younger brother, with his mouth wide open, gets stuck on the first piece of information. After all, the arena disease was responsible for stealing his brother's incredible future. With tears in his eyes, the young man asks how it all happened. But the protagonist simply says that, as he mentioned before, the past must be left behind and buried. Failing to argue against it, Kim Seok gives a slight smile and says that, in any case, it's a relief to know that. Thus, his brother reveals that he discovered information about affiliations when he obtained the entry item. And that happened because the mithril ore is of rank X, something very rare to see. So he needs more information because he has heard that losing his affiliation is not a good thing, especially if it is tied to the item. Ending the conversation, the young man says he will prepare for the arena, and that his brother can contact him if he needs anything. Somewhat awkwardly, the younger brother says that since he has already finished his placement, he can also enter special arenas. Interrupting the young man, the protagonist asks him not to mention anything about carrying him as he knows that would hinder proper growth. Disguising his intent, Kim Seok says he was only going to offer some equipment, but his brother says he doesn't need it. Before actually leaving, he asks what the young man does with the material items he receives in the arena, and the latter reveals that he just throws them away, which was already expected by Kim Simon, as rankers don't pay much attention to material items, which are mainly traded for money. Thus, changing his mind, he says there is something his brother can provide him. Returning to Park Jin-wook's office, the man asks why the younger brother is back. In response, he says that it's his day off, so he doesn't need to leave and doesn't want to. Placing a hand on his head, the Night Hunter questions whether he couldn't be more like his brother, and the young man replies that he cannot. He then reveals that his brother refused the offer to be carried, because that would drastically affect his growth. Laughing, the hunter says he didn't know that someone who had recently completed training already had access to such information. Kim Seok says that his brother has been a prodigy since he was in their mother's womb. Park Jin-wook agrees, stating that the guy he spoke to earlier was definitely not just anyone. The younger brother then says that his brother also refused the equipment, only asking for some material samples. Reflecting to himself, the man says that the young man is a human who dared to play dirty, even promising knowledge of a cure. And that makes him excited for the next chapters. Pulling him out of his thoughts, the young man asks him to investigate Go Malsuk thoroughly. Smiling, the man responds that when he takes on a job, he doesn't do it half-heartedly, so there's no need to ask for that. However, the young man in front of him says he wants him to conduct the investigation separately from the one requested by his brother. Making a joke, Park Jin-wook asks why he is requesting that, and the young man reveals that he thinks his brother is hiding something, but nothing related to the cure for his friend's illness, rather something else that he feels he should know. He reveals that he won't ask directly because he knows it wouldn't work since his intuition tells him it's something similar to what happened 10 years ago. And if there's one thing he doesn't want anymore, it's to be protected from the shadows by someone else. Kim Simon hums happily as he walks through the city, having received something he wasn't expecting, the Night Hunter's materials. Now he doesn't have to worry about medicinal ingredients for a while. His Philosopher's Stone then says it is worried because, unlike him, his brother seems too naive and could be easily deceived. Noticing his owner's reaction, the object says that, in any case, he doesn't need to worry, and the young man asks for the subject to be dropped. Arriving home in his alchemy laboratory, the young man decides to set the elixir aside since the cure for mana-hardening disease, if well managed, could be very profitable, especially because arena diseases affect many people, particularly higher-ranked players. And since he needs funds for future activities, a stable income at that moment is more than essential. He just has to remember his ultimate goal: to find the main culprits behind his brother's death and the destruction of Earth, ensuring that the past does not repeat itself in this new life. Remembering the warning that the arena would be closed on that planet, the young man concludes that everything must be related to some characteristic of his brother. Placing his hand over where the Philosopher's Stone is, he decides to stop thinking and start alchemy. Smiling, the stone is happy and says it has been looking forward to this moment. Looking at his status window, Kim Simon realizes he will have to use most of his achievement points to complete the process, all to obtain a 40% increase in his obsidian tablet. Clicking accept, the transmutation begins and quickly ends, now doubling the item's completion rate. This prompts the Black Goat Constellation to send 500 achievement points as sponsorship, which satisfies him. Grabbing his equipment, the young man decides to enter the special arena Nightmare of the Burning Mine thanks to his entry item, which will be consumed. But a message appears, warning him that at the moment he needs to wait because the room is full. The Philosopher's Stone says that he doesn't need to rush into a special arena, but the young man says that everything is going according to his plan. The object states that since human transmutation has become twice as strong, it should be sufficient, and agrees with the young man's choice. Indecisive, he wonders how he should name his room in the game without choosing something stupid. He then decides to keep the description the same as the last times and start the broadcast. Seeing the viewer's comments, Simon feels relieved that he didn't turn the room's title into clickbait, noticing that even so, his room already has 1,500 spectators. Speaking to the audience, the young man explains that, unlike usual, today he will enter a special arena, which means he won't be able to follow the chat and see what they are saying. Without saying anything else, the young man grabs his oar and begins the trial, where he must survive the nightmare of the mine. As he starts walking, Simon confirms that, as expected of a special arena, there are no clear objectives. It is necessary to understand some abstract hints to complete what is needed and earn rewards. Stumbling into a wall, he cannot feel any magic, nor can he detect anything in the air. Analyzing the arena's name, he concludes that something like a nightmare must have happened there. Or perhaps there is an entity that causes horrible nightmares. Suddenly, a very loud crash happens, drawing his attention. Turning to look, the young man sees a massive fire draken wielding an axe. Quickly understanding who the nightmare of this place is and why the arena has that name, since the creature only appears in gold tier sections or higher. In the chat, people are in disbelief and the constellations show irritation and displeasure, leaving him confused. The monster roars and furiously charges into the attack, not even giving him much time to think. Feeling confident, the protagonist smiles and prepares to snap his fingers and start the fight. With his move, he dodges the creature's axe with such agility that it can't quite grasp what just happened. Hanging from the wall using his Black Panther body fabric, Simon wonders if the Draken is looking for him. Switching his body fabric to that of an ogre, he jumps to deliver a punch with all his strength. The attack lands on the monster's tail, making it howl in pain. Spewing fire from its nostrils in pure fury, the Draken promises to eliminate him once and for all. However, the young man uses another of his magic tricks and begins to fly around the place, releasing a purple light as he does so, delivering another extremely powerful strike with his foot. A blow strong enough to eliminate the creature, leaving his spectators completely shocked by the feat. Smiling, the protagonist thinks that he didn't expect to win with just one hit, growing even more impressed with his body transmutation, which allows him to easily transmute bodies in a single location, being more powerful and different from mass transmutation. Due to the young man's performance, the three constellations watch him decide to reward him with 1,000 achievement points. This surprises him since he didn't expect to earn so much just for defeating a Draken. Thinking further, Kim Simon remembers that entities hate dragons in general, so there must have been some conflict between them and the Dragon Emperor. It is revealed that the Emperor first appeared on Earth during a massive outbreak in Germany. Forcing even the most powerful dragons to bow before him, he destroyed all of Europe in less than a day, etching his existence into the minds of people around the world forever. The young man concludes that even without knowing why, the constellation's hatred of dragons can be considered good news. Since these creatures often appear as bosses in arenas, this will earn him a lot of support and benefits. Suddenly, what sounds like a scream catches his attention. The mine contains other Drakens who are at that moment brutally eliminating what appears to be a player. Caught off guard, one of the creatures is struck by a boulder that rises from the ground. Its allies look back and spot the culprit, Simon, who has just snapped his fingers. With immense rage, the monsters charge at the young man, who quickly repeats the trick and knocks down another member of the group as if he were a sack of potatoes. The remaining one begins to scream, questioning how someone from the scum of humanity dares to do that to his friends. But to his surprise, the protagonist, once again using the ogre's body fabric, grabs the giant axe with a single hand. And he begins to wrap the weapon's handle around the enemy's arm, who is unable to stop it. The creature can only watch as the object moves on its own and finishes the job, brutally eliminating it in sequence. Reflecting to himself, the young man realizes that there doesn't seem to be a nerf on the monster stats as there was with the goblins. His spectators still can't believe what they just witnessed. Noticing the messages, Simon wonders about the reason for the new commotion, wishing he had a manager to oversee the chat. But since he can't call the Constellation's manager again, the young man decides to deal with his fans on his own. With a fake little smile on his face, he says that he's not a combat type, but rather a magic type, regretting immediately as his appearance only causes more chaos among the viewers. Responding to the fans, he says he cannot reveal his characteristics as they are requesting. He can only say that he's a magic type. Suddenly, the person the Drakens were beating starts whispering, stammering while begging to be spared. To Kim Simon's shock, the wounded girl on the ground is a dwarf. Remembering when he entered the room, the young man realizes that it was mentioned this was the dwarves' holy land. Kneeling, he moves closer to try to do something and prevent the girl from passing away, which may not take long considering it's a miracle she's still breathing given her condition. Thinking to himself, the young man wonders if the dragons were trying to inflict the maximum amount of pain on the victim before finishing the job. Interjecting in the situation, the philosopher's stone questions why he isn't looking for other survivors instead of trying to help someone who's already at death's door. He responds that he cannot do that, because aside from having empathy, according to what the mithril ore said, this dwarf must be the key to the special arena. And since it's impossible for her to have arrived there so quickly given the arena's classification, it means that she should have died before even meeting the player who entered, making it even more urgent to save her. Opening his inventory, Kim Simon tries to decide what to do. Intrigued, the philosopher's stone reminds him that he left all his alchemy tools behind, so he doesn't have many options. Confident, the young man says he will make new ones. After all, he is an alchemist. Mocking him, the artifact says it thought he had forgotten that since he's only been doing human transmutation lately. Separating what he will need, the young man smiles and says he will now pay more attention to alchemy, because at this rate, the poor dwarf doesn't have much strength or time left. Reflecting, he looks at the materials and realizes that transmuting a potion will take too long, which forces him to change direction and try another plan. Speaking with the stone, the young man says that in this case, they should perform only one transmutation. Hesitant, the object says that will be very difficult given the severity of the wounds, but he states that he plans to use achievement points. The stone quickly agrees, and the protagonist warns that first, they need to do something about the external injuries. For that, you will use John Wick, whose primary weapon is the artifact of the Asclepios constellation, making him a high-rank healer. He snaps his fingers and a message appears, informing him that he will need to use 500 achievement points, making the young man realize that such a weapon must belong to a constellation rank lower than Zeus since it is cheaper. The stone then says that the artifact alone will not be enough to efficiently complete the objective, leaving the young man frustrated and tense for not being able to save the poor wounded child. Solving the problem, the stone says it will adjust the price so that the points will be sufficient, relieving him as he still has a long way to go, being only level 12, even though he is in a much better situation than in his past life. Optimistic, the young man says that the rest is just a matter of time and that even though small, his growth rate is still remarkable. Starting the transmutation, Simon notices that the completion rate is 33%, much higher than he expected, even surpassing Astrape's completion rate, which is only 10% despite consuming the same amount of points. Unintentionally, he says that, as expected, the constellation's classification has a significant impact on the decision rate, awakening the entity's interest, which begins to observe the fallen patient carefully, immediately initiating the healing process through its power. A bright green light emerges and the wounds disappear as if they had never existed. Amazed, the young man just watches and feels happy to finally be doing what he saw in the broadcast before the regression. The weapon begins to disappear from his hand, and even knowing that there will be no return, Simon thinks that it was the right thing to do. Once again, the spectators go wild witnessing such a magical event. Still on the ground, the young girl begins to open her eyes and regain consciousness. She is shocked to see a human standing right in front of her. With her hands on her head, the girl starts to remember what happened before she blacked out. Trying to calm her down, the young man tells her that she is safe now, but she asks what he means by that. Standing up, the young girl sees the fallen creatures and asks if they were all defeated. In response, the protagonist says that he took care of all the monsters nearby, making the girl run to hug him. Clinging to his legs, she starts crying and begging for help, leaving the young man completely stunned and unable to react. After the initial panic, the two now venture together into the vast and dark mine, feeling the weight of the oppressive atmosphere surrounding them. As Simon moves forward without hesitation, he eliminates all the enemies that appear along the way with his full power. The scene impresses his new companion, who is completely shocked to witness such immense strength being used against gigantic and terrifying monsters. Lost amidst the tunnels, the young man asks Marnel if they are still on the right path. In response, the girl reassures him with confidence, saying that yes, they are almost at their final destination, so they just need to keep going. With only a little more to go before reaching the mine's center, she reinforces that he should simply keep following her. Thinking to himself, the protagonist reflects on his intuition and realizes that, as it seems, his hunch was correct from the very beginning. He is certain that something extremely important is there, something that will significantly impact the clearing of this special area. After walking a few more meters, he suddenly stops, looking ahead with a confused expression before warning that Marnel must have made a mistake, because right in front of them, the path is completely blocked by a gigantic stone wall, making any passage impossible. Analyzing the situation more carefully, Simon notices an intriguing detail, as if someone had cut that massive rock and deliberately placed it there. With a confident smile, the girl mentions an old saying, "A wise dwarf always digs 9 tunnels." Then, without hesitation, she asks Simon to wait for a minute because she knows exactly what to do. Placing her hand on the large stone wall, an intense orange light begins to shine at the center. And to Simon's surprise, a secret passage forms right before his eyes, revealing that there had been a hidden path all along. Explaining, Marnel reveals that this passage is exclusively for the Elder's use, meaning no one else should be using it. But given the urgency of the situation, they cannot afford to take the main gate, where they would face even more enemies along the way. With a genuine smile, Kim Simon is impressed by the intelligence and cunning of his guide, who, despite her age, shows great insight. And from the bottom of his heart, he sincerely wishes that the hope and light in that girl's eyes never fade. Reaching a long corridor, Marnel indicates that if they follow it, they will find the mine's core, which will allow them to restart the defense system. With that, they will prevent the Drakens from continuing to spread uncontrollably and destructively, ensuring a bit more safety for the area. Suddenly, unknown voices echo through the surroundings, interrupting their steps and putting both of them on alert. Turning her gaze toward the source of the sound, Marnel panics upon seeing a completely destroyed structure, a scene of pure devastation. Desperate, the little girl falls to her knees among the rubble and begins to pray to the gods that at least the mine's core is still intact. But to her sorrow and despair, as she gets closer, she realizes that the item has also been destroyed, crushing her hopes. Watching the scene carefully, Simon realizes that in this state, recovering the artifact will be an extremely difficult task, perhaps even impossible. However, to his complete shock and surprise, he recognizes the destroyed object and realizes that it is the same item he obtained in the last arena. Still kneeling and overcome with anguish, Marnel murmurs that without that core, no one else can be saved. But before she gives in to despair, Simon interrupts her and, without saying a word, extends an inactive mind core that he had in his arsenal. In the live stream chat, viewers ask in disbelief how everything always seems to work out perfectly for him at crucial moments. Little do they know that, in reality, this was pure luck, an incredible coincidence that just happened to be useful at the right moment. Holding the item in her small hands, Marnel examines it carefully and says that although it is very similar to the original mind core, it seems unusable. Because unlike the destroyed core, this one does not appear to contain any trace of Earth power, making it incapable of restoring the system. Reflecting on the issue, Simon remembers that a deactivated mind core can be refined by replenishing its lost magical energy. So since this one specifically requires Earth power, they just need to find a way to recharge it with that energy. Opening his status window, the young man notices that at that moment, more than 8,000 people are watching his live broadcast. This means that in addition to progressing in the mission, he is also achieving great success on the platform, securing valuable rewards. Suddenly, the production association sends a notification informing him that he has just received a reward of 100,000 achievement points. With this, his ranking rises to silver level, a significant milestone in his journey within the game. However, focusing on the mission, Simon remembers that he is still inside the arena and needs to get out of there before celebrating. Turning to Marnol, he confidently states that he can restore the core as long as she takes care of the other necessary device for the process. Determined to fulfill her part, the small girl says that the Earth power engine was not completely destroyed, so she will be able to restore it to some extent. For that, she just needs to retrieve a few specific tools, ensuring that the device can operate properly and fulfill its function. Meanwhile, Simon decides to ask the Philosopher's Stone if it is possible to restore the core using alchemy. To his surprise, the stone responds affirmatively, explaining that all he needs to do is use his transmutation power to recreate the lost energy in the core. Shocked by the response, the young man asks if that can really be done, and the object confirms without hesitation, affirming that it is indeed possible to convert common energy into earth energy, and that he will quickly learn the structure of this power, as it is something simple. Suddenly, intense flashes of yellow light appear all around, enveloping the core, which begins to restore itself right before his eyes. With everything completed, Simon discovers that the item has a self-recovery system, which is why it is used as a power source. Meanwhile, Marnol, with her large tool in hand, begins working on her part of the task. Noticing that the young man is watching her attentively, she turns and asks if there is anything else he can do to help. But when she sees that Simon is holding the fully repaired core, the young girl is left completely speechless, unable to believe what her eyes are seeing. Marnol states that she will finish everything soon, and Simon, smiling, comments that with all that strength, not even the Drakens would be a match for them. He then asks where he should place the newly restored artifact, and the girl responds that it should be inserted into the hole located in the center of the engine. The young man obeys without hesitation, and as soon as he fits the core in, an intense light bursts forth, illuminating the entire area and making the dude's hair stand on end. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.